We have our applicant, so we can start.
Yes, I heard you, and we're live on YouTube now.
Good morning and welcome to the public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission for January 25th, 2022. We'll start by taking attendance. Mark, will you call the roll?
Chair Carroll.
Here.
Vice Chair Bland. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
All right, good morning. Again, this is the public hearing and public meeting of January 25th, 2022. And this meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube. So if you would like to testify on any of the public hearing items, you may do so by joining the meeting at the estimated time shown on our agenda, which can be found on our website. And if you would just like to watch the proceedings, you may do so on our YouTube channel. And today we're going to start the day with a few public meeting items, which are items that have already had a public hearing and are returning today with a revised proposal in response to comments from that hearing. And then we'll move to our public hearing agenda. And before we get started, I do want to just introduce a new member of our team. And in a minute, I'll ask her to take her mic off and wave so that the public can see her. Maybe she can just say hello. So she'll be on the YouTube. But Sonia Guiar is our new Director of Community and Intergovernmental Affairs. And we're so fortunate to have her join our team. She is an experienced Director in Public Policy and Government. Most recently, Sonia was the Director of External and Intergovernmental Affairs at the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission, where she also served as a Deputy Director and Senior Policy Analyst. And at TLC, she worked closely with elected officials and their teams and with City Hall and the Deputy Mayor for Operations on a variety of legislative and policy matters. And so we're so delighted to have her join us now. She'll be working with Sasha Seeley, whom you all know is our Intergovernmental and Community Affairs Associate, and they'll be working together. And we're really looking forward to having this, the two of them as a team. So Sonia, do you want to just quickly say hi so that the public can see you?
I'm extremely excited to join the team. Really looking to all the great work that we'll do together.
Great, thank you. Okay, all right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to take us through our agendas today.
Okay, thanks, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting item number 1, LPC 22-02676, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 174, Lot 28. 71 Franklin Street in the Tribeca East Historic District. This is an Italianate Second Empire style store and loft building built in 1859 to 61. And the application is to construct a rooftop addition, replace windows, and alter the ground floor. This was last presented at the public hearing of December 7th, 2021, and no action was taken at that time. And the staff will be walking everyone through the revised proposal.
Winnie, you're muted.
Sorry, I was having some issues here. And staff. This item is 71 Franklin Street, located on the south side of Franklin Street between Broadway and Church Street in the Tribeca East Historic District. Here are some historic photographs that you saw last month. Here is the existing and proposed axon diagrams of the building. And here are some streetscape photos. The commission approved a proposal for a visible rooftop addition and alteration to the storefront infill at this building back in 2015. That approval has since expired, and the applicants returned to represent a similar proposal at the public hearing last month on December 7, 2021, which included work at the vault light covers, replacing storefront infill, replacement of windows throughout the front facade, matching the historic windows in terms of configuration, but not in terms of operation, and the construction of a rooftop addition. At the public hearing last month, the commissioners present expressed concerns regarding several aspects of the proposal. Here are some photographs of the existing conditions on site. With regards to the work at the vault light covers, the applicant has clarified and modified the proposal to include replacing the deteriorated cast iron vault light at the location highlighted in green on the slide with new cast iron vault lights, which will be installed flush with the sidewalk and left exposed to provide a barrier-free access instead of removing the vault light covers and lowering the platform to grade. The locations shaded in blue are currently covered in diamond plate, which will be maintained, and the locations shaded in orange are existing exposed deteriorated vault light that will remain and be protected with diamond plate, which can both be reviewed at staff level. Here are some close-up additional photographs of the existing vault lights. While supportive of the general configuration of the storefront infill, some commissioners expressed concern over the removal of the historic transom bars and paneling at the infill. In response, the applicant has modified the design of the infill at the base of the building to incorporate a dentellited transom bar matching the historic one across all the bays at the base of the building. And here are the proposed elevation and plan that was shown last time on the left, and the new revised additions on the right. And here are some close-up details and sections. Here are some close-up photographs of the existing historic transom bar on the upper right that they're proposing to replicate at this time. Here are some close-up of that plan view. And here are some renders of the new revised proposal at the base. So with regards to the replacement of windows, the commissioners expressed support for the change in operation. However, some commissioners were concerned with the details of the replacement window. In response, the applicant has worked with the windows manufacturer to refine the window details to ensure that the replacement windows will match the historic windows as much as possible while allowing for the change in operation. So here are some close-up photographs of the windows. And here are some of the detail drawings for the different window types. With regards to the rooftop addition, the commission expressed a consensus of support for a rooftop addition. However, they were concerned about the height and finish of the addition and detailing of the cladding materials. To address this, the applicant has changed the solid parapet at the addition to a mesh railing and the parapet at the elevator bulkhead to a curb with safety railings where needed only. The color of the addition has also been restudied and is now proposed to be a gray instead of off-white. The applicant has also added additional details regarding the proposed brick and stucco cladding and is proposing the brick to wrap the corner of the addition as shown in the details on the slide. This slide shows the change in the parapets of the addition. The applicant has also relocated the mechanical equipment previously proposed at the roof of the stair bulkhead to the roof of the penthouse to remove the bulk at that location. Again, the previous proposals on the left and the new proposals on the right. And here are the refined details for that. Here's the revised render close-up of the penthouse addition. And here are the modified renders at the sidewalk. Again, the mock-up is on the left, the previous proposal is in the center, and the new proposals on the right. The applicant is here to answer any questions. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Winnie. Commissioners, do we have any questions for Winnie or the applicant? Okay, and I just want to confirm they did revise the window details so that they're
Yes.
closer than previously presented. Okay, great. All right, and I'll just also note for the record that we did receive a written letter in opposition from an individual on this revised proposal. All right, commissioners, if there are no questions, I'm going to start to unmute you so we can begin our discussion and move toward an action. Okay. All right, so this, as we said, there are three components: a rooftop addition. Well, actually, there are four: rooftop addition, new windows that will have an tilt operation for the high performance, energy performance, but will match the configuration and closely match the details. New storefronts that have been refined since we last saw them, and the replacement of a section of vault light covers with new vault light covers, new cast iron and glass vault light covers. And again, this is an application that we had previously approved a rooftop addition and more contemporary storefronts. And this is and this application actually, as presented today, is actually has made some refinements over what was previously approved. So I think that in response to your comments, this has moved in a very good direction. So why don't we go ahead and have our discussion. Commissioner Holford Smith, I think last time you were the one who, while others were sort of comfortable with the penthouse because we had approved it before, you had suggested lowering it. And in addition, I think at the storefront, you wanted to see some refined details, and you were concerned about the removal of the vault light covers, which they're now proposing to replace with new cast iron and glass vault light covers. So how are you feeling at this point?
I think that, excuse me, that the rooftop addition is much improved by being lowered and changed in color to gray. So I think the changes they've made there are appropriate and approvable. I applaud the applicant for proposing to install new vault light covers, or new vault lights, I should say, at the storefront. So I think that part of my comment was addressed. I would still like them to work closely with staff to maintain as much original material as possible. I would be preferable if they could keep the existing transom bars. I'm not sure why they're replacing them exactly the same as what exists right now, but I think they can work with staff on that. And I think the windows look acceptable to me now as well. So I think this is approvable.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I feel that they have addressed the concerns that I had and many of the other commissioners with regard to the storefront and the rooftop addition and the vault lights. And I think all in all, this is generally a very good proposal. So I can approve it.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, you had similar concerns last time.
It looks good. I approve. I think it's appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Devonshire?
Yeah, I think it's much improved, and I agree with most of Ann's comments. And with regard to the sidewalk vault, I'm happy that they've seen the light.
Okay, Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I'm glad anytime is enlightened. I agree with Ann, Commissioner Devonshire, and the other commissioners' comment as well. I think it's appropriate.
And Commissioner Lutfi.
I agree. I think these are changes that have really refined the project and make sense. I can definitely approve it. I also appreciate the fact that they have been working with the window manufacturer and the staff on the details of these windows, and I think they should continue to work with staff.
Jefferson, I think last time you hadn't seen enough information to comment, but at this point you've seen the response. So how are you feeling?
I think on all, excuse me, on all 4 items, much improved. I can approve this.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I think I agree with the fellow commissioners. I think this is appropriate as is. It seems to me this is the applicant was very, very responsive, and it seems like a win-win, one of those situations where we commented and the applicant gets what they want in terms of the changes they need on the building, and they do it in a way that is appropriate. So I'm grateful that they listened.
Okay, great. And Commissioner Shamir Baran, I think you weren't present last time. And I don't know if you've seen enough today to.
I have, and I think I agree with everyone's comments. This is appropriate, and it seems like the revisions that were made really were responsive. So I'm in approval.
Okay, all right, great. So why don't I go ahead and make this motion? Let me take this one. In the matter of docket number 22-02676, 71 Franklin Street in the Tribeca East Historic District, an Italianate Second Empire style store and loft building built in 1859 to 61. This is an application to construct a rooftop addition, replace windows, and alter the ground floor. And I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Tribeca East Historic District. And I recommend approval with some refinements, finding that the proposed rooftop addition will not damage or destroy any significant architectural features, that the presence of the visible 1-story rooftop addition with bulkhead and railings will be compatible with the surrounding streetscape, which features a variety of building types and heights and several examples of visible rooftop additions that vary in scale and include similar appurtenances, that the proposed gray brick and stucco cladding at the rooftop addition will help the addition blend with the finishes of its surrounding context, especially when viewed from public thoroughfares from the west, that many of the original windows at the front facade were replaced with different configurations with the introduction of the fire escape prior to designation. Therefore, the loss of original historic fabric will be minimal, that the proposed wood windows featuring fixed upper sashes and tilt and turn lower sashes simulating the appearance of 2/2 double hung windows with straight and arched heads and muntins and a beige finish will match the historic windows in terms of configuration, material, and finish. That the proposed storefront infill featuring wood doors, display windows with profiled bulkheads and iron grills and transoms with denticulated moldings, all with a gray finish, will match or recall the historic storefront details found at this building and will be in keeping with the historic storefront infill found at buildings of this style, type, and age in terms of general configuration, proportions, material, finish, and details. And that the section of historic cast iron vault light platform to be removed is deteriorated and will be replaced with new cast iron vault light panels at grade, thereby maintaining the presence of this significant feature at this location. However, I recommend that the applicant continue to work with the staff to ensure that the window details can be manufactured as presented and that they'll closely match the historic windows, and that they explore to the extent possible the condition and the potential retention of any additional historic fabric at the storefront level. All right, Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
I second it.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved. Please continue to work with the staff on the details, and we'll move to the next item.
Thank you. The next item is public meeting item number 2, LPC 22-00550, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1129, Lot 39, 6 to 16 West 77th Street in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. This is a neo-Renaissance style apartment building designed by Nathan Korn, built in 1927, and the application is to construct a rooftop addition. This was last presented at the public hearing of November 16th, 2021, and no action was taken at that time. The staff will do a brief introduction before the applicant presents the revised proposal after we open the proceedings.
Okay, great. And I think I'll just go ahead and suggest that we do that now so that that can be a seamless transition when we get there. So Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
I make the motion.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so the proceedings are open and the applicants may speak after the staff introduces the project.
Good morning, Commissioners. Julianne Wiesner-Chianese, Preservation Staff. The proposal as presented at the public hearing of November 16th, 2021 is to demolish a rooftop addition and to construct a new rooftop addition. At the public hearing, a majority of the commissioners expressed support for the proposal. However, some commissioners had concerns about the degree of visibility of the proposed addition from Central Park West and Central Park, especially the 18th floor, and requested that the applicants restudy the placement and massing of the 18th floor and consider lowering the overall addition. With that, I'll pass it along to the applicants to walk you through their revised proposal.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner Carroll and commissioners. Okay, so thank you very much. I think today we wanted to discuss our updated architectural approach based on the constructive feedback and commentary we had last time we spoke. I think it's what we'd like to do is obviously recognize that in our previous discussion that this is within the historical district and there are a number of apartment buildings which have setback penthouses, which are often of a utilitarian or differing architectural style to the base building they sit upon. Obviously, as per the introduction, a lot of the conversation last time was about our architectural philosophy of sort of replacing the much altered pink stucco box that's on top of the building and replacing that with a modern intervention that's respectful of the massing. But there was a number of comments to do with visibility, recognizing that yes, it is visible from a number of points, particularly the park, but actually could we go back and look at the upper massing, the level 18 box, and study this, which we have done, and would like to sort of share the philosophy for that. So here's a three-dimensional diagram of what we showed you before, and focusing in on the upper level, the level 18 box. This is how we presented it before. It's asymmetrical in its massing, that it has the sort of studio space on the northern side and the kind of MEP on the right-hand side, the southern side here. So we went away and did a number of visibility studies and looked at it and rethought the composition for the upper level with the objective to try and not just reduce its height, its positioning, but its architectural style to become a little bit more subservient to the predominant floor below the level 17 glass box. And we were able to do that by, in essence, moving the MEP component from the western side, from the southern side to the western side, and reduce that in height by 3 foot, and consolidate the new roof area, which you're seeing here, reducing it from 30-foot wide to 20-foot wide. And really that is important from the visibility from the northeast corner. And also by changing the detailing of the glass and the framing, we can reduce the overall height of that by about 1'7". So here's a render of the new proposal. So you're seeing it in essence from sort of behind here, but you can see the upper mass, the darker element, that's the MEP component, which is now reduced down from the 12-foot down to 9 foot in height, and seeing the sort of the edge of the glass box. So going back, just as a reminder of the existing conditions in pink, showing the current penthouse with the 2 elevator overruns on top. And then on the next slide, showing where we were previously. And again, our level 17 box, making the conscious decision to actually align that with the adjacent penthouse here. So with our sort of eyebrow slope matching the slope of the neighboring terracotta tiles, and our sort of upper component of the roof actually aligning with the Aquitilians terracotta detailing next door. But then with our new design here, you can see how we've the overall width is reduced and the height has come down. So sort of the slightly faded pink box here, showing the new kind of massing that's visible from the street. So it's really a third reduction in its width, and the side-by-side comparison here. So really thinking about how we can reduce its presence by breaking down that massing upstairs. So then looking at the cross section where we were before, and again, if I step forward to the next slide. So the big moves here is by making these changes and the changing of detailing, by removing sliding doors and making the glazing more fixed at the upper level, we can sort of reduce the detailing around the edge and bring that height down by the 1'7" that we mentioned. And on the left-hand side, the western side here, the MEP component, bringing that down as well to try and create a much more lightweight construction overall. And volumetrically, it's about 17% smaller, but the significant thing is the upper roof is 30% smaller than the overall roof that we had before. We have studied, and we're working with Silmans, the engineers, to look at all opportunities to reduce and compress the level 17 floor build-ups, and that is something we're still going to there's an ongoing discussion that we may be able to get a few extra inches out of that steelwork, but obviously it's very important to spread the loads into the existing micro columns that run through the building. But we feel the sort of the upper box is the dominant element that's visible, and that's the one that we've put the most focus on to try and reduce the visibility. So the render that we showed you before, and as you can see in the upper box here, sort of slightly heavier detailing at the very top here, and then showing a side-by-side comparison with here on the left, the previously presented, and then on the right, the revised architectural solution. So just a very quick overview of the plan. Just you can see there's a pink dotted line. That was the original footprint, and it's really about reducing the height, but also pulling it back on the northern side, and actually the MEP component, reducing that in its north-south dimension by 5'4" on the north and about 4 foot on the southern side. So trying to get that reduction, but it's the sort of reduction of the east-west dimension that is the most prominent in the views. And then seeing side-by-side comparison here. So footprint-wise, very similar, but a repositioning and a more centering balanced around those elevator overruns on the eastern side. Just moving downstairs to level 17, no real changes here. And then obviously we have the lower level that's embedded within the historical building, where we have the sort of 3 further bedrooms down here. And then going back up, sort of a viewpoint that you would not normally see because we're sort of floating outside the building, but recognizing now with the sort of the change in detailing for the upper level 18 box, a much more slimline edge detailing, which is a little bit more similar to the kind of the lightweight filigree steelwork within the neighboring dunnage. And again, I think we've gone away and studied this a lot from a visibility point of view, but we actually think architecturally it's a much stronger scheme than where we were before. So again, we do thank you for the opportunity to come back and share this, because we do think it's actually helped push the scheme on. further. So you're really seeing the comparison side by side here, which I think tells a lot, that you can see the bulk and the mass has been reduced and it's a much more lightweight. So it has a different architectural solution. It's the same family for the upper level, but much more lightweight. And again, looking at that from the northeast corner and then showing the revised. And again, within here, it's not just the height that's come down, it's the overall footprint of the kind of the living space, the studio roof has been reduced by that 30% in this configuration, which makes a big difference from the viewpoints. And then the side-by-side comparison here. So that on the right-hand side, are much more lightweight. But again, still having the pavilion for the main floor downstairs, which is respectful of the original footprint. And then a few of the street viewpoints, obviously existing conditions seen from the park. And the next slide shows the previous proposal. You can see sort of at the top, the sort of the level 18, where we're looking very dominantly at that sort of solid mass. But in the revised scheme, it's much more fragmented and lightweight now. So blends much more into that rooftop dunnage and again becomes much more subservient to the floor below. So quieter in its nature by being more camouflaged into the background richness of the rooftops. And again, side-by-side comparison. And again, a few viewpoints looking at the existing conditions here. And again, as we showed previously, recognizing that sort of the level 17 box is visible, but what can we do to reduce the level 18 box on top? And actually then in the sort of the new proposed scheme, reducing that east-west dimension helps to create a much more lightweight presence on top, and the side-by-side comparison. And then the views from the park, the existing condition, and then where we were previously, obviously feeling much more sort of asymmetrical, where it's kind of north facing the glass box, and really now a more balanced approach architecturally with the slimline roof, and actually that the mass on the level 18 is where the existing elevator overrun sits anyway. Side-by-side comparison. And then from the 76th Street, this is the open lot, which is intended to be built out by the Historical Society, but is currently a viewpoint you can see. And again, the comparison between the two. In the repositioning, the penthouse box has moved slightly further to the south, but with its height reduction has not made any material difference in the viewpoints. And then coming back round to Central Park West, really, you know, probably the most dominant and important view seen from this location. And again, the mass is reduced. So if this works, now obviously one of the comments from the last meeting was really big to actually see if we could put this into an animation to show. We decided it would actually be even better to put it into a film footage, so there's no sort of lost information in the massing, so we can really is truthful and can see the setting and actually how you can see it. So all being well, I'm going to share my screen. And I'm hoping that is visible. So we're going to see if this can stream live. It may be a little bit jumpy on your screens because we're streaming this from our computer. But this is a journey down 77th Street, heading towards Central Park West. So looking up on your right-hand side, we have the building, the scaffolding you can see up there as a part of the facade maintenance work that takes place, but no real visibility. Now onto Central Park West, moving in a southerly direction, looking across, we can see the visibility on the right-hand side of sort of the primary penthouse box and just catching a glimpse of the adjacent penthouse, but very difficult to see behind the trees, even without the leaves on it. But seeing here with a reduced footprint, the level 18 is less dominant in the views, and especially as we start getting closer, it starts to completely disappear behind sort of the roof, which obviously is respect for the original footprint, as we explained last time. And obviously continuing further down, Central Park Avenue, looking up, and obviously a viewpoint constantly looking at the building in this viewpoint, and losing the northern elevation disappears obviously as you get closer because it's not visible on the actual 77th Street. And then back onto Central Park West, but heading in a northern direction, there is a couple of glimpses where you can actually see the level 17 box through here, the level 18 not visible from this angle. And obviously becoming invisible once we get closer to the Historical Society. And then moving up 76th Street, as we described in the views, the viewpoint as you glimpse between the trees and the open lot at the moment. This is an opportunity where we do just then see the penthouse appearing and disappearing again. Then just for help, we wanted to just show very quickly a comparison video, which on the left-hand side shows the existing on the right-hand side. And I think this is useful to really show you the comparison of actually what you see with the existing conditions, that you can see the sort of the penthouse box, the pink stucco, and then our pavilion on the right-hand side. So really showing how the massing is similar and respectful in seeing these conditions. So just really giving you a glimpse of just seeing the two side by side. And this is, we've just run this view for the Central Park West view, just to really, so you can see the difference between the two. Fantastic. Okay, so I think that is our presentation for today. And again, I think for us, I think the important thing is the opportunity to go back and rethink the architecture for the upper level. We think the scheme is better for the conversation and for the redesign, both from a visibility point of view, but for architectural clarity as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So forgive my ignorance, and you probably did cover this last time, but I just want to try to, for my own mind, understand the bones of the scheme. The elevator are being brought up to the 18th level because they are an overrun of the elevation of the elevators to the 17th floor to provide access to the new penthouse. Is that correct? Or do they provide access to the 18th level as well?
So the elevator overruns that we see in the existing condition and in our design are existing. So they are already there and they are servicing the level 17. So there's no actual elevator stop at level 18 itself. That's the physical overrun of both the goods elevator and the passenger elevator.
So the top of the current elevator overrun is where you're showing your revised top of mechanical penthouse?
Correct. So the actual in the revised scheme on the right-hand side, the upper roof, the glass roof, the glass enclosure, that aligns with the top of the elevator overruns, obviously including waterproofing, etc., roofing over it, but that's now aligning with those elevator overruns.
Okay. And what is the material of the mechanical enclosure?
That's envisaged at the moment in blackened stainless steel. So a matte metal finish, not quite as raw as a sort of a painted finish. So it's a crafted matte stainless steel that's blackened.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson. All right, let me go to Commissioner Lutfi. I think Commissioner Jefferson had a question too, but we'll go to Commissioner Lutfi.
So the first floor of the penthouse is elevated from the rooftop. There are some steps that lead up to it. What is that height? I'm wondering.
That height's approximately around 2 foot.
Okay.
And
Thank
that's to take into account that we have a new steel structure which distributes the loads from our new pavilion back down to a series of kind of micro columns that run through the building. So it just gives it that elevation within that. So instead of making that feel solid, the idea is that we've actually sort of recessed the underside of that slightly, just so it feels more lightweight. So architecturally, it sits more gently on top of the roof.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, and I see Commissioner Jefferson, you don't have your hand up now. I just wanted to make sure though, if you had a question.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I have two questions. One, are they two volumes on level 18? Are they separated from each other, or they're just in section drop down?
They're actually they're joined together. They're not physically actually passed between them, but actually they are co-joined.
They're co-joined, but one
co-joined.
is higher than the
one. One is slightly higher. So what we've been able to do is push the, what you're seeing here on the right-hand side, we're able to push this down lower because it's the MEP components. It's only 9 foot high, whereas the glass element is slightly higher, it's a foot taller, because that's actually the living space, the study room.
Okay. The second question has to do with perception. The edge condition of this box, this glass box, is dominant. You could see it from the street. You could see the edge condition. In the existing building, the edge condition is also dominant, but there's a wall, right? At the edge of the wall, there's this pattern at the top. The question I have is, from down below, when you look up, you're seeing the ceiling of the interior, right? And then this dark edge.
Mm-hmm.
I know, because of the type of building and the aesthetic of it, if it was a lighter color, would it be fit in more, or would it? Or do you want the edge condition to be dominant, and that's why you did it this way?
Well, I think it's a very, very good question. We originally studied looking at this about whether the metalwork should be white, but actually we found it was more alien to have kind of white profile edging. It felt more in keeping with the kind of the rooftop dunnage that's adjacent, and that language to be replicated here. We also found that a darker edge felt more sympathetic to the difference between the stucco and the terracotta, because there is that color contrast between the two in tonal difference. And I think we wanted to sort of mirror that as well, and try and define the edge, even though it is a very thin edge, still have clarity that it is actually expressed.
Right. Thank you very much. I think it creates an abstraction. That's quite handsome, I think, but thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? All right, not seeing any other questions. I'll just note for the record that we received 15 letters in opposition, and a letter in opposition from Landmarks West, and a letter representing some of the tenants at 6-16 West 77th Street in opposition, and one letter in support. These all came in response to the revised proposal, and as always, were shared with all of you commissioners prior to today. Okay, so let's see, commissioners, if we don't have any questions, we should move to our discussion. So I'm starting to send requests to unmute you. Okay, and Commissioner Holford Smith, would you? Oh, we actually don't need to close the hearing. We didn't open the hearing, so we're good. All right. So, as we discussed at the initial hearing, and as you all commented and recognized, the Upper West Side has apartment buildings that historically featured one-story penthouses and mechanical bulkheads, as did this building. And this building has an existing setback 7th floor in stucco. And I think most people were very comfortable with the idea of replacing it with this design, this particular design and set of materials. But there were some questions about the visibility. So we'll go ahead and have that discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, I think last time you particularly noted the kind of roofscapes of the Upper West Side and the visibility of the existing penthouse, and felt that the 17th floor was appropriate, but asked that they reposition the 18th floor. So if you want to take it from there and let us know how you're feeling now, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you very much. And I want to thank the applicants for a fantastic presentation. That's really, I think, you know, the suggestion that the use of the video is just so illuminating, I think.
Yeah.
It really helps me put the project into context in a very unexpected way. I mean, and what came out of the video for me was two things. First of all, the incredible prominence of the ceiling of this addition. You know, you're seeing that ceiling more than, and it really changes the nature of the volume of the thing. You know, it used to be that it was a wall, it was a solid volume at the top of the building. And now you're really focused on that plane, at least for the times of the year when the shades are up. But they still haven't shown it with the shades down, and it's my belief that this thing will be visible to the public much more shades down than shades up. But that's fine. And there's something about the openness of the structure that, even though it's the exact same size, the 17th floor that is, as the current penthouse, because of the fenestration and the focus on this, you know, this glass and the scale of it, the scale of the divisions, it feels bigger. It feels bigger and it feels unitized. It's clearly one space. And you don't get that impression from penthouses, generally speaking. It very much has an impact for me on the scale of the perception of the object on the roof. And what that does is it makes it quite different, in my view, from a classic rooftop penthouse, and quite different from what was there. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. It's obviously quite different from what was there, even though it's more or less the same volume. So going to appropriateness, I think that the volume of the 17th floor addition remains, in my view, appropriate. I think that what Everardo started on is something that occurred to me. The applicant referred very much to the color as being referent to dunnage. When I look at the streetscape, I don't see a lot of dunnage. I see a lot of rooftop bulkheads that are kind of lighter in color. And I think that the black, especially against the white ceiling, pushes the contrast to a point where it's becoming a little bit of an aggressive statement. And I would suggest that they study the color again. And that is especially true of the visible aspects of the 18th floor bulkhead. The 18th floor bulkhead is a volume that, if anything, is analogous to other elevator bulkheads and maybe the water towers, which is definitely lighter in color than that which is shown here. So I would suggest that they look at that to reduce the apparent contrast of the element on the skyline, which I think draws attention to itself in an inappropriate way and draws it away from the building that it sits on. Furthermore, I think that the visibility of the 18th floor, while improved, remains significant, especially from the park and from other vantage points. And as we have done with other rooftop additions, a 10-foot ceiling is hardly a requirement. And I think that the applicant should work with the staff to reduce the height of the 18th floor bulkhead to reduce its visibility. Obviously, that will not change the visibility of the elevator bulkheads, which are taller, but it'll improve the visibility of the it would reduce the visibility of the 18th floor element. And I think that sums it up for me. I think the other thing that could be considered, but might not be necessary, is reducing the extent of the northern portion of the 18th floor bulkhead element. The thing that makes this unusual is the 18th floor element. And I think that the general comments before were suggestive, if not requiring, that it be removed. I think it would definitely be a better application if it were removed. But I think that if it's going to stay, it should have a reduced volume.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Commissioner Chapin, I think last time you were largely also supportive of the design approach. And so how are you feeling with the changes we've seen today?
I think the changes are very positive. It's a fine design, and it's I think quite minimalist in approach, and I think that's a good thing. I think that it is in the context of a number of other rooftop additions, and I think the idea of a modern addition here is perfectly fine. It is visible. There's just no question about it. It's going to be visible no matter what, as was the current situation and a lot of other rooftop additions on the Upper West Side and on Central Park West. I think that Michael's comment probably is appropriate in my view. Lightening it up a little, I wouldn't go to a white, but maybe a lighter gray that could blend in a little bit more would lessen the visibility and call less attention to itself. But I personally think that it is appropriate, even though there's an additional floor. I think that's the way they've put it together at this point. I could approve it as presented with the suggestion they work with the staff on getting a color that's a little more likely to just blend in with the skyline.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Commissioner Chen, I think last time you were also very comfortable with the design and felt that it had a lot of integrity, and I think didn't necessarily feel that the 18th floor had to be reduced, but you felt you would go along with that suggestion if the applicants pursued it. So how are you feeling now?
I think, as Diana Chapin has mentioned, number point, as well as Michael Goldblum, I think generally, given there's no way of hiding this thing. This thing is clearly visible, and given the existing bulkhead is already reaching that level, and so Michael Goldblum's question is a valid one, which is that it's really the 18th floor, and whether the board and the commission members feel that's appropriate. So I think that's where we are.
Okay, so I think you're suggesting that they continue to work on the 18th floor.
Yes.
Okay. And Commissioner Jefferson, I think you also last time thought the design approach was appropriate, but did suggest that they set the 18th floor back. And so with the changes today, how are you feeling?
I think the changes today are substantial and does improve the project. I don't see what they could possibly do to make it smaller. The bulkhead is what it is. And either they reduce the glass space or leave it the way it is. I can accept this project. I think it's a beautiful project compared to what was there. It's lovely. And so I can accept or approve this project.
Okay, and your thoughts on the color? I think you could.
The color issue, the outline is the dominant thing, and you're not going to get rid of that in any way. From down below, you paint it white, you're going to see the ceiling of the interior, which is what's dominant. So it's always going to be there, so you have to accept that.
Right, and Commissioner Gustafson, I think we can thank you for suggesting the video, the animation. That was your suggestion, actually. And I think you also felt, because the existing 17th floor is approximately the same size and visible, that really for you, the 18th floor was also the issue last time.
Yeah. With regard to the 18th floor, I agree with Commissioner Goldblum that, the easiest solution there, which I think he implied, but may not be standing on, is to eliminate it. I thought long and hard about comments, I believe, that were made by Commissioner Shamir Barron the last time we heard this, with regard to how we deal with rooftop additions on Central Park West and on Fifth Avenue. And as noted by the applicant, most of these rooftop additions are utilitarian rooftop additions that are, and even penthouses that relate to rooftop additions. And I can't reconcile approving this with the level of attention that we give to every other rooftop addition around the park. Obviously that's not a negative comment on how beautiful the design is. It's about consistent decision-making for the commission and treating all applicants equally. Approving this is not simply approving this structure. It's groundbreaking for people who own buildings all around the park, who would not want this structure on their rooftop. And as the chair pointed out, what we're typically dealing with is one-story penthouses and mechanical bulkheads. So in the end, both in terms of visibility, form, and how it looks against the open sky, it's just conspicuously more visible and materially different, and certainly would, in my mind, draw undue attention to itself. So I could not find this appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, I think last time you had similar concerns about the visibility of the 18th floor, but also asked that the applicants look at reducing the overall height on both floors.
Yeah, I have to concur with everybody, and I said this the last time, that this is a beautiful structure, and one that it would be lovely to have it as part of the landscape of our city. I appreciate the changes that the applicant has made. And I think they've been particularly effective with the second level, because what they've done is they've reduced the volume, and even from the perspective I'm looking at right now on page 21, even reducing some of the glazing on the front, and also lowering the top a bit. I think the top is not the big issue here, because in some ways I feel that it does, your eye can pass over it and kind of blends with the rest of the skyscape, which is full of water towers and other things on tops of roofs. I do think the issue, and Michael Goldblum said it very articulately, there's something about the massing on the bottom and the glass that calls your eyes to that level of the project. And I still feel that it needs to be, that's the level that needs to be lowered to me. And if there's room, and it wasn't really clear to me based on the applicant's response to my question, I'm not an engineer, so I don't know. But if there is room to bring that level down, I think it would help. It would help the perception from the street when you're looking up at the project, at the penthouse. And in terms of the color, I don't think it would work well if it was white. I mean, I'm really fine with it. If you know, the commissioners felt like it needed to be toned down a bit, I would bring it into a gray color, not even light gray though, because I think it would detract from the architectural integrity of the penthouse itself, and visually what we would be seeing, because we are going to see something. I don't want to diminish, by the way, what Commissioner Gustafson said, because I do also agree that this is an important statement and step that we're making. So for me, I'm concerned about setting a precedent that would make it difficult for us and everyone who lives in these buildings and the neighborhoods where these penthouses tend to go up. And so I think my comments are directed toward trying to make this project work. It's a wonderfully designed penthouse, but also trying to respect some of the thinking and guidelines behind our prior decisions.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Devonshire and Commissioner Holford Smith, you were not here last time, but you've heard some of the sort of how we described the presentation from last time. You've heard the revised proposal and your colleagues' comments. So let's see what your thoughts are now. Commissioner Devonshire.
Thanks, Sarah. I do believe that additions, and I think this design is successful in its own right. I think additions need to be, as they say, of their time. However, this one needs to be far less visible than it is. And I agree with John Gustafson almost 100% that the importance of this decision that we're making today. And as much as we like to think that we aren't setting precedents, whenever we do this, they become a precedent for some future applicant. And I'm trying to imagine every building on Central Park West with an addition like this on it. And it's not ringing true to me. I appreciate the revisions that the applicant has made, and I think the 18th floor revision is perfectly acceptable. I do not believe that the lower level has been reduced enough, and it needs to be lower, and it needs to be pulled further back so that I'm not seeing that edge, which in agreement with Michael Goldblum, I don't think anybody would ever think that white would be a suitable color for this. I think a neutral gray, almost looking like Rhine zinc or a galvanized material would be appropriate. One of the things that gives me pause is what the revised object will look like from the street or from the park at night when it is lit. And what you're seeing is that beacon of I'm sure it's going to be a white ceiling inside. It's just going to be a beacon on that side of the park. And so if that's going to remain as it is, this thing needs to be lower and pulled back so that it is not so self-consciously apparent on the top of this building.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yes. Well, I appreciate the changes that have been made. I, missed the first presentation. But I agree with some of my fellow commissioners in that I think it is still very prominent. And as Michael Devonshire just pointed out, at night, it is going to be this glowing box up there. So I think that the lower volume, the 17th floor, currently has a 10'6" interior volume. And I think that could certainly be lowered and still be very gracious. And that would help reduce visibility all around. I agree with the color of the metal. I think it should be more like a zinc color. And I think that is true for all of the metal, not just the bulkhead, mechanical bulkhead, but all the roof eaves and everything, just to help reduce the contrast of this against the skyline. But I think it should be brought down and potentially even brought in a little bit to reduce its visibility.
Okay. All right. And I want to thank you all for commenting so thoughtfully here. So I think where we are is, again, we will take no action and we'll ask the applicant to continue to study this and think about our comments, which really speak to lowering and both floors, looking at both floors sort of holistically and thinking about how you can lower it and reduce the visibility and explore the materiality and the finish of the metal to help the addition sort of blend and recede into the kind of typical roofscapes that we have on the Upper West Side. So we'll take no action and we will ask the applicants to come back when they're ready with a revised proposal. Thank you all. And we'll move to the next item.
The next item is public meeting item number 3, LPC 22-00769, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 636, Lot 41, 396 West Street in the Weehawken Street Historic District. This is a neo-Renaissance style hotel designed by Charles Stegmeyer and built in 1903-04. And the application is to install storefront infill and signage, alter the facade, and construct a rooftop addition. This was last presented at the public hearing of November 23rd, 2021, and no action was taken at that time. The staff will do a brief introduction before handing it off to the applicant to present the revised proposal after we open the proceedings.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and open the proceedings now. So commissioners, I'm sending you a request to unmute. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so the applicants may speak after the staff introduces the project.
Good morning, Commissioners. James Rusiello, Preservation Staff. At the public hearing on November 23rd, the applicants proposed a visible one-story aluminum and glass rooftop addition with brick details, the installation of signage, and alterations to the first floor, including new aluminum and glass storefront infill surmounted by new decorative brickwork banding. At the time, there was a consensus that a visible addition would be appropriate in this context, given the siting of the building at a corner where it could be seen from long distances against a background of taller buildings. However, all the commissioners agreed that the addition needed to be restudied to reduce its visibility, either through lowering the addition, setting it back from, or some combination of the two, simplifying the design, especially restudying or eliminating the overhang, which is an area that made the addition more visible, and clarifying the configuration and rhythm of its fenestration. There was a suggestion to have the addition reflect the district's maritime industrial heritage. The commissioners all agreed that the brick detailing are encouraged to look at sheet metal cornices that relate to the building's cornice, as this was what was likely there originally, and that the storefronts could benefit from additional refinement. The applicants have returned with a response to those comments, including a redesign of the addition, the installation of a new storefront cornice, and changes to the storefront infill. Michael, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
All right, I'll get started. So I'm Michael Kipfer. I'm from Mancini Duffy Architecture, and we're representing the applicant for this location. As James pointed out, we have come back with a few redesign items that we'd like to present to you, and thank you for hearing us today. So to just jump right into everything here on the screen, you can see kind of a diagram generalizing some of the comments that were made and some of our actions that we took. Reduce the visibility we did, inset the penthouse 2 feet on the south and west side, and we also lowered the penthouse as well. And then we made a new type of construction and materials for the penthouse to address the notion of simplifying the materiality of the penthouse to more of a utilitarian material that didn't try to go against all of the building's historical character down below. Then down at the bottom, there was a lot of talk about the then presented brick sign band and to move that to more of a pressed metal solution, and then to reduce the flatness of the storefront in general. So we added different types of profiling into the storefront in general to help add more depth to it. And then I think I have control now. Very quickly, the main points of this building were to make it flood compliant, restore the building's envelope, and to promote general wellness and interior comfort. So we're still abiding by those project guidelines that we had set. And then this specific presentation is just going to focus on everything we've changed since there. So we won't go through kind of all of the initial concepts we presented last time. A quick kind of summary of the building's history, the timelines. It's well documented, and you can kind of just see. You can see maybe in these photos just how the lower level, the storefronts and the brick sign band that's been there throughout its history are well present throughout. Going up to kind of the general view of the project, this is what was presented at the last hearing. You can see, I think that the biggest move that we're going to make here, and I have the revised one on the next slide, is just how much lack of contrast there was from the penthouse above and the pressed metal cornice above. And then down below, the brick sign band, and if that could have a more appropriate solution to what was probably originally there. So going to the updated render, obviously from this specific view, you can see the biggest change is the inset 2 feet on each side and lowering the penthouse 9 inches. At least from this view, settles the visibility problem. I'll move to the next slide in a bit that shows the penthouse design. But down on the street level, you can see we added kind of a more simple streamline signage band with a pressed metal cornice solution. The idea here is not to have too much going on in the sideband. We don't want to detract from all of the details that are in the second and third floor with all the terracotta ornamentation and the lovely cornice that's existing on the building that we are just restoring. And so, we wanted kind of a more utilitarian focused sign band down here instead of trying to add too much decor to everything. The storefronts have also, we've increased kind of the depth and the profiles on the storefronts, and we've raised the glass as well that you'll see in another slide, just so that it has a little bit more of a bold presence. Moving on to the penthouse, this was the previous design that we showed. You can see, I think the general consensus, it was rather busy. We were going for kind of the piers to mimic the repetition of the building below. So onto the new design, first of all, you can see that it's lowered, and we went to a zinc type of cladding system. With that, the color is a lot more neutral and utilitarian. It's trying not to, we want to make sure that, no one's going to confuse it from the historical context of the building. And then as far as the repetition that we wanted to generate from the building's form and their existing piers, We chose to do that rather than making actual piers coming out from the penthouse. We chose to bring the windows a tiny bit outside of the building so that you could still draw that repetition that was happening, and you could still have a bit of character to the building itself without having to do too many formal moves on the whole facade of the penthouse itself. Moving on to a closer shot, this is that overhang that James mentioned from the last meeting. As you started to get away from the building, it did start to exhibit its own presence and kind of the profile of how the building was overhung. So in the new design, we're really just trying to simplify that profile, not try to do too much formally with the bold form of it, but more so still generate some type of rhythm with these. I kind of am referring to them as inset piers, where the windows are actually, through their mullion character, are creating that repetition. And then once again, you can kind of just see how we inset the building from the edge, just to try to get a little bit more sky in there. Coming down to the other side, the original design, you can see those piers coming from the building, and then obviously a large setback of the redesign that was considered. Coming inside just real quickly, just seeing how it's coming and compounding down on the interior. Moving on to the elevation, this is south, looking north. Our previous design, moving in toward kind of the storefront level and the sign ban, it existing today and throughout the majority of the history is just a backer brick that has stayed at this transom level throughout time. The original one was just trying to spruce that up, but we do agree that some type of cornice, a banding, a cap to the storefront is appropriate here. So we added more of a simplified utilitarian sign band here. It's still pressed metal, and it's still capping the lower level piers that are coming up, because the piers do change as they go up to the second and third floors. But it still has the character and some of the seams that help cap everything. Moving on to more of a zoomed in profile. One thing I want to point out here, this is the original design that we had presented previously. You can see there's kind of just a lot of layers that are in this storefront level, especially at the transom header. So moving on to the new design, we just raised up that transom glass. We think it brings a lot more of a consistent nature to the storefront level. And then you can see some of the profiles that we've added to the vertical and horizontal mullions of these storefronts to help bring the depth out in this. And then you can see we have the current backer brick is more in line with these piers. We've protruded the cornice a tiny bit out just so that it caps those piers and sets you up for the transition to the upper levels. Here is just, I think we're just going into kind of the fall pictures. That was the previous penthouse, and here's the new revised penthouse. Once again, a lot more of a utilitarian neutral context that it's generating. This is the previous one. You can kind of see the profile that's happening there, and then the new one where it's set back a lot more and is just a lot more neutral. I'll kind of just jump through these. Here's another view of that. Moving on to kind of the specifics. So we are going for a glass system with a black powder coated mullion system. And then there's this really great material, kind of a standing seam zinc cladding system. The gray is very neutral, not too bold, not too shiny. It provides kind of just that nice neutral background with the materiality that's going on there. Here's just a little bit more zoomed in of kind of all the components that are there with the zinc panel and the storefront system. A few elevations. and these are just really more to show kind of the reduction in height that we proposed in the offset from here. Once again, 2 feet and 9 inches. The plan just to show kind of, we're slowly creeping in when we did that offset on kind of the usable nature of up here with, once you count in the core, the egress and the ADA access that we have in here, we're left with just over 14 feet of the usable space of the penthouse. So we thought the 2 feet achieved what the commissioners were asking as far as trying to reduce the visibility while also keeping, kind of the minimal usable square footage up here to make the penthouse. We did update all of our view sheds. So here on the top of each page, you'll see our previous digital mock-up. And then down here, you'll see the new proposed mock-up. And, once again, just getting rid of all of kind of the complex character that was happening, still keeping, a nice contemporary slim form, but not necessarily competing with the cornice. That was the really big thing, is just making sure we weren't competing with the cornice. A couple more view sheds through here. This is from the north side looking kind of southeast. Here's down Weehawken looking up, and once again, just the cornice and the contrast is we think abiding by some of the comments from last time. Moving on, we did get a new, now that it's winter, we were able to get a new shot down Weehawken as well. And you can see it's the contrast is a lot better. Storefronts and openings, the same amount of storefronts and everything. The biggest thing being, the last time our transom glass wasn't as tall. We think it fills that opening a lot more without having to have the different sets of aluminum there. And then you can just see more of the articulation that's happening in the mullions. And we do have back in the appendix kind of full on details of all these situations. Signage, pretty much everything is at staff level except for this marquee sign at the corner of the building. Throughout history, there's always been a marquee sign. There is an existing marquee sign there. We're seeking to restore that and replace it with the building's address. And you can just see the plan and profile. It's kind of a triangular shaped profile sign right now. We'd be seeking to make it a little bit more slimmer as it is, but still keep kind of that historical touch to the building. And then once again, just more signage that has been reviewed at staff level. And then that is just kind of the ending slide of everything we've done. So be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I know we do have one question. Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The red brick at the base of the building, is it painted or is that the natural color?
It's a painted brick. So all the brick is painted on the building, and we're seeking to just restore the existing color of those paints.
Okay, and there's no base detail or any kind of stone footer or something like that where it hits the ground?
I don't believe so. I can go back to the historic photos, but I don't think there is a stone footer.
And what is the material of the black stuff under the windows in the storefront?
It would be part of the storefront system. It's an aluminum type system.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Lutfi just
got it. Yeah,
good.
So my question was also about the brick at the base of the building, because the coloration in what the base would be from the first presentation to the second is a little different. It looks darker. Is this dark, deep red what was original to the building, or is this just the most recent iteration of the color? Not what you proposed, what's, the deep color now?
Yeah, the two-tone color of the building came through the mid 1900s. I'd have to go back to the historical images to show you exactly when it happened, but we're not intending to change any colors from our previous hearing to this. Maybe there was something with the render or like the flat nature of the cornice that's making it look more deeper or something, but the red, we're just seeking to match what's there. It's kind of a deeper orange red, whereas the top two floors are painted kind of like a more orange.
Michael?
Yes.
If you were to go to page 104 to 106 in the appendix, you do have slides that show the brick and masonry cleaning.
Yeah, so here you can kind of see kind of the faded, you have the orange color above and kind of the deeper red down below. And our intention would be to match those colors. Maybe our renders are showing a little bit more higher contrast than.
Just the next slide particularly, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go back to the beginning. You can kind of see that bottom corner down there really shows the existing nature and kind of how this is 1980, and I think is the first time we have a colored photo documenting that painted brick condition.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Commissioner Jefferson.
If you go back to page 56 and the sign band on the left-hand side, was that always there? How long has that sign band with the decoration, the vertical elements been there? How long has it?
So,
is that original fabric or?
Yeah, so the sign band, it's been bare all the way back to the 1927 images. You can tell that it is a backer type brick, which implies that there was probably some type of cornice there. But it has been empty and blank of that backer brick since 1927.
So on the left-hand side, that's what's there now. It's been there since 1927.
On the left-hand side was our previous design proposal, where at first we wanted to keep it a masonry element because it's always, for the majority of this building's history, it has been a masonry element. So we were just proposing in the previous iteration to keep it masonry and propose some type of detailing along there to keep it masonry, but maybe spruce it up a bit. But in reviewing all of the comments and going back to kind of the baseline of what this band needed to be, we agreed that adding too much decor elements that weren't in the existing historical context might deter from how that band has interacted with the facade for so long. So the new one on the right is really just trying to simplify that, covering the backer brick up with a metal cornice, which we believe to be, the.
Right. But what I'm asking, what was there in 1927?
Let me show you. So 1927 is down here. Let me just zoom in. So you can see it's just a bare brick band that's going around. There's remnants of what we think was some type of sign application to the facade on the far north west bay, but the rest of the band is just blank. And so we were thinking, to try to maintain kind of that smooth nature so that the ground floor can transition to the upper floors.
Thank you very much.
And-
All right,
And just
Commissioner
in terms of the, oh yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, James.
Sorry, in terms of the detail photos there, it's 87, page 87 to 90 in the appendix.
Okay, I think. Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yeah, going back to the coloration topic. In your appendix where you show the cleaning tests, it appears that the brick at the ground level is a buff color, which actually, if you go back to the 1927 photo, you can see how the building appears much lighter. So my question is, would you consider stripping the paint off and restoring the original color of the building rather than paint what appears to be a much later, much darker color to the building?
Yeah, we did try to see, you know, the condition of the buff brick, and it wasn't a consistent finish when we did try to strip it. We stripped it, you know, per all the guidelines, and it wasn't a consistent color under there, and that's when we decided that we'd rather just restore or just repair the paint to match the existing colors of the building.
Yeah, it appears that the ground level brick is a different color than the upper level brick.
Yeah, they seem to have kind of different qualities and finishes under each part. I think there's 3 types of bricks that we're playing with here. There's kind of the ground level, there's the backer brick, and then there's the upper level. And all of them were coming out in inconsistent finishes when we stripped it. And we kind of do like the character that's happening, you know, with the two-tone of the building. So we decided to just maintain that color.
Would you be stripping the paint or just repainting on top?
I would have to defer to our historical consultant, but it's more of kind of if we wouldn't just be painting over, you know, peeling paint, we would definitely, you know, grind or remove what was damaged and then go back over it with the correct color.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'm. Could you explain what you mean by there weren't consistent finishes? And I'm curious to know if there was staff who were involved and reviewed any of these removals and saw what the underlying material was and the condition.
Yes, we did review this with Liz when she was with LPC. She came out and reviewed the removals. I can, James, what was that page again in the appendix?
Sorry, Michael. Actually, would you mind just doing full screen again, or giving someone else control of this presentation? So it's going to be page 104. Yep. But
so these are the different results from the different strips that happened. You can see the backer brick on the side, and you can see the upper floor brick, and then you can see the lower level brick. And we just, it wasn't coming out. The original type of brick is a buff brick, but the finish of the buff wasn't necessarily what we were hoping it would be, you know, as far as that nice quality, consistent color. You know, it looked to be, it had a mix of grays and things like that. And that's why we chose to match the paint there. I don't know if that answered your question, but
well, that looks like a first pass with a paint removal material. Did you pursue that further?
Yeah, so they tried without a remover, you know, just under the PSI that you're allowed to. And when that got to a certain level, They tried the chemical agent that was approved. They let it sit and dry and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And it got us to this point. So we tried a couple passes at the removal.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
All right, other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to start sending you requests to unmute yourself so that we can begin our discussion. And so this proposal included the penthouse, the storefront work, the corner sign, and then they were proposing a treatment at the former location of a cornice above the storefronts. And at the last public hearing, I think the commissioners were comfortable with a visible addition, as James said, given the surrounding context, but asked that it be reduced and simplified. And we asked for some changes to the storefront details. And I think we asked them to explore doing a more traditional cornice. And now we've had this further discussion on the paint removal. So let's go ahead and start our discussion. Commissioner Devonshire, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I'm okay with this. I think if we went back to a what might have been an original cornice, which would be much more ornate at the storefront, it would clash with the more simplified window surrounds. So I'm okay with what they've done here. I can approve this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Likewise here. I think the only thing I would add is ask them to work with the staff about the storefront cornice, about the pressed metal, to have more details.
Add more details. Okay. All right. I think, and Commissioner Devonshire, though, cautioned about having it be too robust, right?
Yeah, so I would defer to his expertise.
So, okay. Okay, Commissioner Lutfi?
I don't think I was here for the first round, but the first time came before us, but I do want to say that based on what I've seen, a lot of the changes have been big improvements. The penthouse being reduced, the change in materiality and color are quite good. The depth that's been added to the storefronts. I would like the applicant to work closely with staff on this whole issue of the color of the base. Because it's still, you know, it seems like I'd like to get as close as possible to what it was originally, and make sure that it isn't, there isn't going to be too much of a contrast. And if this is the original cornice above the storefronts, then I'm fine with it. I didn't have a problem conceptually with there being a little more texture because I thought it tied into the upper half of the building. But otherwise, I'm fine.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson?
I think the penthouse addition is quieter and much more appropriate. And I can accept this project. It's a handsome building.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I agree. It's appropriate as is.
Commissioner Shamir Baron?
Yes, I agree too. I should just say that I'm not totally sure what I'm seeing in the historic photographs about that cornice. It sort of looks smooth, but above the storefront, but I'm not 100% sure it really actually is. So I should just say that. But I do think that the reduction in the height of the rooftop is successful, and I think that the other decisions and analyses of the paint and the top cornice, it all looks right to me. So I think it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith?
Yeah, I think this is quite an improved application. Lowering and simplifying the penthouse is definitely an improvement. And I like the raised transom aspect of the storefronts. And the sign band, I think it probably was a much more elaborate cornice originally. So I think they just could work with staff to find a happy medium. But I am still concerned about the paint color. In the appendix, there was a full paint analysis done, and it shows the earliest paint being very, very different from this. So, I mean, my recommendation would be that they would strip all the paint off the brick and restore it to its original finish. But I think that's probably the minority view. So.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, my main concern was the rooftop, and that really has, I think, been very satisfactorily addressed. The sign band, I think perhaps a lot of solutions. This one, I think, is an appropriate solution. And as far as the storefront changes, I think they were in line with those recommended by the commissioners. So I can approve this as presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
The only thing I would add to the conversation, which I agree with wholeheartedly, is that the applicant should work with the staff to add a little bit of detail to the bulkheads below the the aluminum bulkheads. Having it just kind of slam into the sidewalk will be both unattractive and short-lived.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And I think that is generally something the staff asks for anyway when we review storefronts, just for the longevity of it.
Sarah,
Okay,
sorry.
yes.
Can I just say that after hearing Commissioner Holford-Smith's point, I think I agree with her about the paint. I just want to add that.
Okay.
To
So, one thing I would say about the paint is that is covered under our restoration rules, so they would be working with the staff. But I think what we can say is that they should, as they continue to work with the staff to meet the rules for a staff level permit, they should consider all of the comments that we've heard today and try to recall the masonry in color, and if not in actual appearance, in color as closely as possible. But we'll let that be resolved at the staff level using your comments. Okay. All right, great. So otherwise, I think that we have enough here to vote for the proposal as is. I do think we should add a little stone base beneath the storefronts, because that's typically what we would do anyway, but for storefronts, even at staff level. And Commissioner Devonshire, would you go ahead and make that motion?
Sure. Hold, please. In the matter of LPC 2200769396 West Street in the Weehawken Street Historic District, an application to install storefront infill and signage, alter the facade, and construct a rooftop addition, I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural or historic features. The configuration, material details, and finish of the proposed aluminum storefront and entrance infill will be harmonious with the facade and in keeping with storefront infill found at buildings of this age and style, and will bring consistency to the ground floor. The historic photographs reveal the presence of a variety of signage types at this building and district, including the projecting signage at the corner oriel of this building, and that the proposed corner projecting sign and blade sign at the entrance will not overwhelm the building or detract from the streetscape. That the building masonry to be concealed at the storefront sign band is a low quality backup brick exposed after the removal of a cornice. That the installation of a pressed metal cornice sign band to run the entire length of the building on both facades will introduce a consistent feature that recalls a historic cornice. That the subcellar, cellar, and part of the first floor lie below the floodplain elevation, and the proposed work includes relocating building mechanical and electrical systems to the upper floors and roof, which supports the construction of substantial rooftop addition. That the chaotic and varied background of taller buildings allows for the presence of a visible rooftop addition on this smaller scale building. That the rooftop addition will be set back from both the West Street and West 10th Street parapets, maintaining a sense of the building's overall historic massing. that the design of the rooftop addition featuring rib zinc cladding and framed out metal and glass casement window assemblies will relate well to the rhythm of the building below, that the zinc cladding at the rooftop will naturally weather, will relate well to materiality of the industrial maritime nature of the district, and will recede from view. And the mechanical equipment at the roof of the addition will be located in the least visible location at the eastern portion of the roof. And the black finished metal pipe railings at the roof of the addition are simple and utilitarian in design and will not call undue attention to themselves. And that the applicant will work with staff to include a stone base at the storefront and work with the staff also to at the sign band cornice to increase the detailing to further articulate the cornice.
Right. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved with those modifications. Please continue to work with the staff as well as continue to work with the staff to refine the restoration work.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move to our public hearing items, starting with public hearing item number 1, LPC 22-04894, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 2569, lot 46, 1097 Lorimer Street in the Greenpoint Historic District. This is a neo-Greek style row house designed by George Gerard and built in 1884, and the application is to modify a masonry opening and install a window.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen, and then you need to unmute yourself, and you can advance the slides using your arrow keys. Please state your name for the record after you unmute yourself, and you may be
I can't unmute. I don't know how to unmute.
You just did. We can hear you now.
Oh, you can hear me now? Okay, great. Sorry. Hello, my name is Nicholas Brown. I'm the architect working with the owner at 1097 Lorimer Street. I'm here to review a rear window enlargement for a townhouse located in the Greenpoint Historic District in Brooklyn. And this is in Community Board 1. Sorry. Okay, existing context street view. This is a view along Lorimer Street with the townhouse highlighted here. Block plan showing the aerial view of the neighborhood to give a little more context. Block plan view locations. This slide showing view 1 along Lorimer Street. There are some subsequent views where the rear facade is either partially or fully visible, which we'll review in subsequent slides. Again, this is located in the Greenpoint Historic District, which is highlighted by this red boundary, and the project location highlighted here. And then on the right is the tax photo, just to give a little more historic context. Existing block plan, it's an enlarged block plan to show the location of the townhouse and its distance to Collier Street. Again, there are 2 views where the rear facade is either partially or fully visible. One view here on Collier Street, the corner is partially visible over this garage, and then on Guernsey Street, the rear facade is clearly visible across the rear yards. And this is the view from Collier Street. Again, the window in question is on the 1st floor, which is partially visible here. And then on Guernsey Street is pretty clearly visible, the 1st floor kitchen window located here. exterior elevations, rear facade. So the elevation on the right shows the existing elevation with the proposed enlargement dashed located here. And then the elevation on the left is our proposed elevation. When we first reviewed this with Community Board 1, we had shown a 3-panel window. But after speaking with them and really looking at the historic context, it became more apparent that 2 double hungs really fits this facade better. There's an existing bluestone head and sill that we are going to be replicating for the new window. And again, just working with the existing composition, there is a variety of sizes. So the new windows, aligning with the window above, the proportion is the same proportion as the double hung above, just side by side. And then the window elevation in detail, again, showing the bluestone head and sill that's going to match what's currently there. It's an all wood double hung window. And then the brick mold, again, also has a historic profile. And then just taking these steps to really work with the existing facade and make this new opening more harmonious. An enlarged site plan to give a little more context of the window location. So the kitchen window is located in the rear in the skinnier portion of the building. The reason for the enlargement is this space tend to be a little bit more on the darker side. So we want to open it up more to allow more natural light and view to the rear garden. And then exterior photos and details, these detail photos showing the rear facade, the bluestone head and sill, which will be replicated in the new window. And then the kitchen window located here. And then just photos of the neighboring buildings. The photo on the left is looking towards 1099 Lorimer Street, and then the photo on the right towards 1095 Lorimer. And that's pretty much the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have questions? All right, not seeing any questions. I'm going to just see if we have public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Sasha Seeley to see if there isn't anyone that signed up.
Thank you. So we don't have any signups for this item, Chair Carroll, so I'm just going to take a glance over. And I don't see any hands raised as well for this item. So I will hand it back over to you.
Okay, thank you. All right, and we'll just note for the record that we did receive the resolution from Brooklyn Community Board 1 recommending denial, but understand that it was, they were looking at an earlier proposal for the triple window. Right. And they wanted to ensure that the window would maintain the original style of the building. And so you've responded and changed the details to do a paired 1/1 that otherwise sort of matches the details, materials, and configuration of the other windows on the facade. Yes. Okay, so if there are no final questions, let's go ahead and make a motion to close the hearing. Commissioners, I'm sending you a request to unmute. Right, and Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So we're just looking at this window at the parlor floor. And it's, as we've seen in the context, some of the other windows at this level have been altered. I think the one to the right has been reduced in size. So there's not a consistent pattern. And there's a little bit of visibility here. So Commissioner Shamir Baran, would you like to start this one?
Yes, while there's not a lot of visibility, I do think that there's not a lot of variety on the existing, actually. So I think that this is a change. And I think I would prefer if this were, if it was not the 2/2 or whatever that assembly is, but rather the large, like the one in the existing to the right, the large 1/1. I think that would be a better resolution here on this elevation, but I'm curious to hear what others think. If others feel that this is all right because of the reduced visibility here, then I would go along with it as well. I think that the balcony, though, is acceptable.
Okay, thank you. And this is not, I think, a 2/2. This is a pair of
A pair,
1/1s, right?
Yep.
So he is trying to match the configuration. I'm not sure that a wider 1/1 would actually operate very easily. You might have to go to a commercial style window at that point. So, but let's go around and see if we have other comments and see where we are. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yes, I think that this is appropriate. I think that the scale of the windows, even though it is obviously different from what was there before, is an appropriate solution to the issue. So I can approve of the window, and I also think that the railing and the deck is fine.
Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Holford Smith. I think this is modest and appropriate. And though there has visibility, the adjacent buildings haven't, their sort of partner building doesn't have the same windows anymore. And I think that we're probably there originally. And I just feel like it's quite appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
Great, appropriate.
Commissioner Devonshire.
I think it's appropriate.
Commissioner Chen.
Likewise, yeah.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Appropriate.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Appropriate.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Yep, agreed, appropriate.
Okay, so, and I think, while we wouldn't normally require it, even for a visible window, I think that it's nice that they're doing the wood material with the historic profiles to relate to the other windows on this facade. So I think that helps to bring this double window more in keeping with the character of the other windows. So we'll go ahead and make a motion. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you read this one?
Sure. In the matter of LPC 22-04894, 1097 Lorimer Street in the Greenpoint Historic District. Neo-Grec style row house designed by George Gerard and built in 1884. The application is to modify a masonry opening and install a window. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenpoint Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or destroy any significant features of the building, that the modification to the masonry opening at the rear facade will only remove a limited amount of plain brickwork and will not substantially alter the character or solid to void ratio of this secondary facade, that the enlarged masonry opening, while visible through limited gaps in the street wall, will not detract from the simple fenestration pattern of this secondary facade, that the proposed paired 1/1 double hung wood windows will be in keeping with the configuration, operation, materials, details, and finish of other windows found throughout the building, and that the work will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of the building or historic district.
All right, thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baran,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
So that's approved. Thank you very much. And we'll move
Thank
to
you.
the next item. Thank you.
The next item is public hearing item number 2, LPC 22-04322, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 568, Lot 1, 35 Fifth Avenue in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a neo-federal style hotel building designed by Schwartz and Gross and built in 1925. And the application is to replace windows and install rooftop mechanical equipment.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Just click on your screen, and then you can advance the slides using your arrow key. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Good morning. Can you all hear me? Yes, wonderful. Good morning. My name is Valentine Goldstein, Assistant Director of Community Relations at NYU Community Engagement. We are here today to review the application for Reuben Hall, located at 35 Fifth Avenue between 10th and 11th Streets. This application is for the installation of new windows, as well as upgrades to the building's rooftop mechanical infrastructure. The goals of this project are twofold. Firstly, to preserve the historic fabric of the building and return the windows to their historic configuration. And secondly, we are committed to improving building energy efficiency to meet local law 97 sustainability goals, and also to reduce the environmental impact by installing all electric units in a fossil fuel-free HVAC system. This project is scheduled to begin in the spring of 2022 and be completed in the summer of 23. I am joined this morning by representatives from our architecture and design team at FX Collaborative and Building Conservation Associates. Here to walk you through the project is Michael Syracuse from FX Collaborative. Michael, I turn it to you.
Hi, thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Syracuse, partner with FX Collaborative Architects. So Rubin Hall is located in the Greenwich Village Historic District on the corner of 5th Avenue and 10th Street. A little history about the building. It was constructed in 1925 as the Grosvenor Hotel, replacing an earlier building that was constructed on the site. It's connected to 1 East 10th Street immediately to the east, and that's referred to as the Annex. NYU purchased the building in 1964 and replaced the historic windows shortly thereafter. The landmark district was established in 1969, and there have been incremental updates to the building since that time. We're fortunate to have the photo on the left from 1926, shortly after the building's construction, and a current photo of the building is on the right of the screen. The goals for the project include rehabilitating and preserving the building's historic fabric, reinstating the historic window configuration, significantly improving the energy efficiency in accordance with local law 97, creating a high performance interfit or passive house certified building in this renovation and in future renovations, installing an all electric fossil fuel free HVAC system, and increasing the life safety and resiliency by adding an emergency generator. As mentioned, the project is anticipated to be complete in 2023. So the scope to meet those goals includes replacing the windows and reinstating the original window configuration and finish color, replacing and adding equipment to the roof, installing the emergency generator inside of the existing tank house on the roof, which requires infilling windows on that tank house and adding a louvered opening in that construction. So for the windows, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Lizzie Himmel.
Hi, good morning. My name is Elizabeth Himmel. I'm a designer with FX Collaborative Architects. So this photograph is really our most valuable archival documentation for understanding how the windows originally appeared on the building's primary facades before they were replaced in 1968. You can see they are double hung windows with a light colored finish. And from the historical scale figures at the bottom there, you can see that the windows are also quite large, with the predominant size at 6 feet wide by 6 feet tall. On the next slide, you can see drawings from the 1968 window replacement documents that show the different configurations of double hung windows along the top of the slide and the non-historic types they were replaced with along the bottom. And we believe the existing windows shown here were the original windows, and comparison to the 1926 photograph confirms that. So the next slide shows comparative sections from that same drawing set in 1968. And together with the previous slide, this is all the documentation we have of the building's original windows. And on the next slide, you can see that the primary facades for Rubin Hall are the west facade on 5th Avenue and the south facade on 10th Street, shown in red in this diagram. And then we also have secondary visible facades to the east and the north of the annex building, shown in blue, and a courtyard, which is considered secondary non-visible to the north in green. And then the next slide shows elevation diagrams illustrating how we assigned replacement window types to reinstate the original window configurations based on the documentation I just showed. So on the ground floor, the red dash boxes show the only existing historic windows still on the primary facades. We've tagged these HA on the west elevation and HB on the south elevation at the base of the annex building, which was built a couple years earlier and then incorporated into the new hotel in 1925 So the windows on that annex building are a little bit different. And then on the next slide, we're showing drafted elevations of what we believe all the historic window types to have been. Outlined in red at the top are the 2 existing historic window types I just mentioned that are on the primary facades. And then we also have 2 other existing historic window types remaining on the building on the east facade, which is a secondary visible facade, and those are outlined in blue. And then the rest at the bottom are extrapolated from the archival documentation. So for the next slide, the purpose of this slide is to outline the process we took to arrive at the windows we are proposing for this project. As Michael mentioned, we have a very high performance goals for these windows. But in addition to performance, we also have a number of other specific criteria to meet, including durability, historic appropriateness, accessibility, and also physical constraints. So to start with, at the top here, we know that we need to replace these windows with either double hung windows to match the historic or simulated double hung windows with details closely approximating the originals. And unfortunately, true double hung windows cannot meet our air tightness requirements for this project. So we needed to look for high performance simulated double hung windows. And we have a target U value of 0.18 to meet Passive House ENERFIT criteria, which is quite low. From there, we discovered that we need to use aluminum windows because wood windows do not meet the durability requirements for a high-rise building. So we know we need an aluminum window, and because we need to closely match the details of the original windows, we need a simulated double hung with the glazing planes of the 2 sashes offset the way a true double hung window would be. The only 2 manufacturers were able to offer high performance aluminum windows that meet that requirement, and they are both custom products that we have developed with them as part of this design process. And the first that I want to talk about, which is not our proposed window, but I want to touch on the options we explored, is from Wausau, which is able to do a fixed upper sash over an operable lower sash and offset glazing. And this is where we started to understand the physical implications of our particular windows, which are, as I mentioned, predominantly 6 feet tall by 6 feet wide, which is quite large for a double hung window. So that size means that many of the variations of this window that we tried to work out with the fixed over operable sashes faced problems with the weight of the operable sash due to the triple glazing, the size of the hardware necessary to support the weight of the sash, and the location of the operable parts. In particular, we know that LPC favors a fixed upper sash with a lower in-swing hopper, but we are not able to provide that configuration because the latch for that window would have to be higher than the accessible reach range defined by the ADA. And the only way we manage it would be to lower the height of the meeting rail, which would not be historically appropriate. So the window we are proposing here, we have been working through with Schuco. This window has a full tilt turn operation, but otherwise meets the historic performance and durability requirements with offset glazing. It achieves our U value target of 0.18 and does not have hardware or operability issues due to the size of the window. So this is the window we are proposing, and there's more information about all of these other options you see here dashed in red provided in the appendix of this presentation. So the next slide shows a section through the Schuco window we're proposing. Except for the method of operation, this window will be reinstating the original configuration of the historic windows with a narrow meeting rail and offset glazing plane. There will be a custom aluminum brick mold wrapping the frame on 3 sides to match the original windows, and that profile is based on the remaining windows on the ground floor 5th Avenue facade. As you can see in the section, the whole window tilts in as a hopper for ventilation with a 4-inch limit stop. And for maintenance only in most cases, it also swings in as a casement window so that it can be easily kept clean from the inside. For the bedrooms that are designated accessible and any bedroom in which a student requests accessibility, the windows can be operated as casement for ventilation, again with a limit stop. So that gives us great flexibility for universal access in the dorm rooms. I will show where that occurs a bit later on the facades. And again, this is the highest performing window that we looked at, and in fact is one of the highest performing windows available. And on the next slide, you can see on the left existing non-historic windows on the south facade. On the west facade. And on the right, the reinstated historic configuration with our proposed windows. And then the next slide shows us again for the south facade, current on the left and proposed on the right. The next slide shows a comparison of the existing type HA windows, historic type, on the ground floor west facade, and what the proposed window will look like. Also showing the percentages of glazing reduction for each sash, which are within the LPC recommended percentage for high performance windows. And then the next slide shows a rendering of what that proposed replacement will look like when closed. And on the next slide are the details comparing the heads, sills, meeting rails, and jambs. And then the next slide is the same elevation comparison for the type HB windows on the south facade of the annex building. We will be removing the window bars from these windows, and the space behind these windows is an existing bathroom. So these 3 proposed windows will have translucent glazing on the upper and lower sashes. And this is the only place we're proposing translucent glazing on the project. And on the next slide, again, are detailed comparisons for this window, which is the same Schuko window across all the different types on the project, all the different facades, and this time also including an applied muntin, which will be simulating the divided upper sash of this 4/1 window and any other divided light windows. And then the next slides, I think we can flip through quickly to show how our proposed replacements for the non-historic windows compare with the historic types we identified from the archival drawings. And then this is a diagram showing the operation of the primary facade windows for ventilation. Everything in yellow has the inward tilting hopper for ventilation with a 4-inch limit stop. And everything in green operates as casement only, either because they're in accessible bedrooms or in the case of these tripartite windows on the annex, because only the center light is necessary for ventilation because we're operating the whole window. So the side lights are operable for maintenance only. And then on the next slide, we show how we chose a finish color based on the archival photograph matching the shade of the limestone accents of the building. And then on the next, showing the triple glazed IGU that will help us achieve our very strict performance requirement to meet EnerPhit Passive House certification. And lastly, on the next slide, just some images to show where similar Schuko tilt turn windows have been used within a historic district, although this is new construction and a bit different typology than what we're talking about here. And then Michael will walk through the rest of the scope of work.
Great, thank you. So on to the rooftop mechanical equipment. This is the existing roof plan. The existing construction is characterized by a series of stepped roofs and utilitarian bulkheads. Shown in yellow is the existing roof equipment that will be removed. This is the proposed roof plan indicating the new equipment in orange. It's notable that NYU Rubin Hall is currently the only building in NYU's portfolio that is not air conditioned, and adding air conditioning is a large portion of this project. We reviewed multiple locations for all of this equipment to be sensitive to the views from the public way, the noise requirements, the neighboring buildings, and other code requirements. We also reviewed all of the mechanical equipment with our acoustic consultant to make sure that it's within those noise code requirements. Notably, at the south side and on the west side, we're adding a visual screen as required by zoning to shield the mechanical equipment from view. This is a section looking at the building from cutting through Fifth Avenue, indicating that none of the equipment is visible from directly across Fifth Avenue. And a section similarly cutting through 10th Street, indicating that no equipment is visible because of the existing building construction to the front. This is a diagram indicating the zoning requirement for the mechanical screen, since the mechanical equipment protrudes through the sky exposure plane, as does much of the building. We're required to add this perforated metal screen that will be in a matte finish gray color. A mock-up was constructed on top of the building representing all of the rails, mechanical screens, and mechanical equipment, and currently exists on the building today for anyone to visit. This diagram shows in yellow the surrounding area with Rubin Hall in the center. Any place that's shaded yellow, any of the roof construction is visible to any degree. So whether it's to a small degree or to a greater degree, the yellow areas show that those locations. And then the numbered views are specific photographs and renderings that we'll go through on the next slides. Starting here from the west at 6th Avenue and 10th Street, we have a photograph of the mock-up and an inset of the rendering. And then a little bit closer to the building on 10th Street towards 5th Avenue. 10th Street near 5th Avenue again, and then swinging around on 5th Avenue looking north from 9th Street, again with the rendered views inset. These are views from the east on East 10th Street towards University Place. And then East 10th Street near Broadway, and then up on East 11th Street and West 11th Street. So with that, I hope that you'll find that our proposals are sensitive to the historic fabric of the building, and I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have questions? Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Lutfi, please go ahead. Commissioner Lutfi, did you?
She's on mute.
Yeah, did you accept the request to unmute? There you go.
Sorry about that. I'm hoping you can clarify this. So I was unaware that modern double, well insulated, well-made double hung windows might not meet the new local law requirements or passive house requirements. Could someone on the staff shed a little light on that?
Yeah, Corey, would you like to start on that, and then the applicant can speak specifically to their situation?
Yeah, I think the applicant can answer this for the most part because they have a much larger building and different requirements and goals that come into play here. But strictly speaking, for the passive house projects that you all have reviewed and the staff has reviewed, double hung windows have never been something that's worked in order to meet that standard. They've always been ones with these simulated double hung and the compression seals that come along with the operating lower sash. So nothing's really changed about that. But again, I think the applicant, they may want to clarify the differences between goals and requirements. And even local law 97 is not so prescriptive. It's more about overall carbon reductions than doing specific things.
Yeah, and I'll just, so Commissioner Lutfi, you may recall this morning at 71 Franklin Street, we approved a window where it was a simulated double hung, but the bottom sash tilted for this very reason.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll let the applicant go on and explain in more detail.
Sure, yeah. I can touch on that. So I think the primary issue is a typical sliding double hung window or similar. Any sort of sliding window does not have a compressible seal, and really by comparison to a swinging window or a hopper or awning window is actually fairly leaky because of that sliding seal. With an existing building, there's sort of only so many opportunities where we have to improve the energy performance of the building. So the efficiency of the windows becomes a very important component. We're adding insulation to the interior of the exterior walls, but the windows are a large component of that exterior envelope. So thus having them be very efficient really pulls down the energy usage of the building as a whole.
Okay, but it sounds like it's more of a passive house requirement than a local law 97 requirement.
The passive house is more prescriptive than the overall local law 97.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Thanks. I'm wondering if you've considered sort of making an exception to the 3 windows on the Fifth Avenue first floor and finding out a way to allow for that middle bar to retain its narrow, thin dimension and potentially wood construction. And then separately, I'm just curious about whether or not that 4-inch stop has an override, if you can actually increase it manually. Thanks.
Sure, go ahead, Lizzie, please.
I was just going to say the 4-inch limit stop is put in place, as part of New York City building code, but it can be removed for window maintenance for any kind of, instance in which the window needs to be opened more. It can be, but it's done by kind of a building custodian. It's not really accessible to students to undo that limit stop.
Okay, other questions?
Wait, did you answer the first floor issue?
We did not, about retaining those existing windows.
I considered it. But retaining that type.
I think consistent with what we understand LPC goals are to sort of replace windows throughout the building in kind, so they're all matching, and that has been our stance with this, to replace all the windows at all the levels, since there are so few remaining historic windows.
But those 3 on the Fifth Avenue side, some of the criteria that you're applying, both the energy criteria as well as the serviceability, might be considered a little bit differently for the first floor?
But potentially, certainly the serviceability is different at the first floor.
Can I just ask whether you're saying to retain the existing historic windows or to use a different window type that would be more closely matching the historic window at that location?
Yes.
The latter, okay. Because I don't know if you saw in the photos, they're quite dilapidated, unfortunately.
Right. No, I'm talking about their replacement with something that conforms more to the historic dimensions and profiles and materiality.
Okay. All right, other questions? All right, why don't we move to testimony, and we may continue this conversation after the testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony.
All right, thank you. So I do have one sign up for this item. George Calderaro from Victorian Society of New York. You'll be receiving a request from me. Okay, George, I see you are rejoining the meeting as a panelist. Please just unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Commissioners. George Calderaro, Chair of the Preservation Committee of the Victorian Society, New York. Historic preservation criteria for windows, and in fact, the Commission's own criteria for many years, encompass the following: preserve historic material when it remains, and when windows must be replaced, match the historic windows in material, configuration, operation, details, and finish. This proposal fails on most counts. It tosses out the remaining historic windows at the building's base and doesn't meet the criteria for material, operation, details, and possibly finish, no paint analysis being provided. That leaves only configuration, and even that is compromised by the strange, overly broad meeting rails with visible drainage holes and no sash offset. The proposed windows may perform well in terms of energy efficiency, but they are very poor performers in terms of historic preservation. Energy efficiency, while it may be an aspiration, is not a criterion for historic appropriateness. We urge that the proposal be revised to meet historic preservation standards. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let me take a glance over and see if there's any additional hands raised. And I do not see anyone else who wishes to testify, so I'll hand it back over to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommended approval of the application. Okay, would you like to respond to the testimony we've heard?
Yes, I'm going to pass it over to our colleague Alex Ray from BCA to discuss the historic appropriateness of the windows. Alex?
Hi, thanks, Valentine. Alex Ray with Building Conservation Associates. In terms of the meeting the criteria for historical appropriateness, Michael alluded to earlier that while we're trying to meet the rules, adhere to the rules as closely as possible, the design team is targeting sort of the acknowledged exception to some of the rules that the LPC has accounted for projects pursuing passive house certification and high energy efficiency window replacement. So we were sort of looking to fall in this as much as we can under those criteria.
Okay. All right, yes, Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, just one question on the topic of the windows. The choice of the Schuco windows was made because they are more efficient versus the Wausau, because the Wausau are the more traditional ones in terms of the way we've seen them in the past on passive houses. I mean, can the Wausau be considered appropriate? Will they do the job for you?
Lizzie, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So the Schuco windows were narrowed down for a number of reasons, and it's not just the thermal performance of the window, although it is the only window that meets our performance goal. The issue with the Wausau windows, while they are great windows, is partly due to the large size of these double hung windows, and also the glazing that we need to use in order to meet the performance goal, which is a triple glazed IGU. Essentially, what we did was we went through every possible configuration of fixed over operable that we could, and each one had its very own limiting factors that made it, not feasible for use in this project. And I can speak to a slide if that's helpful. If you want Michael to go to the first slide in our appendix that we've provided, just to sort of show how we, the next slide. And then the next slide. This is like, we have many breakdowns of all the criteria that we're trying to meet, but then this is just a slide looking at how we started to identify issues with all the different fixed over operability functions that we could come up with within this Windows system that has fairly good thermal performance. I already mentioned the issue with the fixed over lower hopper window not meeting ADA criteria, which we need to meet because we're a dormitory building. The casement lower, which we've seen, utilized in this kind of situation. The windows are 6 feet wide by 6 feet tall, so that casement sash would be 6 feet wide by 3 feet tall, and the overall weight of the sash was too much of a cantilever for the hardware to manage. The lower in-swing awning have some kind of obvious issues with water infiltration. As soon as a student leaves that window open during a rainstorm, we're now filling the building with water. So that was not desired. And then, the last one we came up with was a lower outswing awning, which had some upsides and was kind of, our front runner. But it does have some downsides from a maintenance standpoint. And then, so we did consider that. That's one of the kind of standards, one of the options that we narrowed down to. And then if you go to the next slide, we tried to modify that window to add an operable upper pane just to see if we could get that kind of cleanability that would help NYU keep these windows looking sharp for longer. But that did result in a kind of widening of the meeting rail, which was not desirable from a historic standpoint. And then there are other issues with this window as well. Even with the outswing hopper, the sash is so heavy enough that it drives up the size of the hardware, and there was a minimum height of the lower sash. So that actually drove the meeting rail up, meaning that it just kind of distorted the original proportion of the double hung window, which was not historically desirable. And then we also had issues with this window on some of the smaller window locations because, of course, there's problems with big windows, but then there also are problems with narrow windows, and we have quite a few very narrow windows in this project as well. with fitting the hardware in the window to make it operable. So for example, that tripartite window on the annex south facade, the side lights of that window were too narrow with this Wausau system to fit the operability hardware. But if we're only operating the lower sash, we'd need all 3 sashes to operate for it to meet ventilation area requirements. So we would have had to change the proportion of that tripartite window to make those side lights wider so that all 3 lights could operate. And in the end, we just thought, even though, you know, the Schuko window, it answers our performance criteria the best, but it also seems like the simplest solution to meeting, you know, to reinstating the historic window without compromising on, you know, proportion and the elevational truth of what those windows used to look like. And the only way that it's significantly different is in the operation. Sorry, it's a long-winded answer, but it's a long process.
Yeah, I got it and I appreciate it. Thank you. But just to follow up on one point there, the meeting rail, you came back to that a number of times, that in this Wausau option, is the meeting rail even bigger than the very big Schuko meeting rail?
So Michael, could you go to the next slide? So this is an elevation comparison for those 3 options that were kind of our front runners to Wausau. That's option 1A and option 1B. And then option 2 is Schuko. And you can see that they are roughly the same. The issue with the Wausau was not necessarily that the meeting rail was wider, but that we had to push it up in the window in order to fit the hardware to operate the lower sash. So it threw off.
So it's not a symmetrical, it's not that the meeting rail moves up and it's not a symmetrical double hung, it's an asymmetrical double hung.
Exactly. And if you go to the next slide, Michael, you can see a section compared to one more. There's a lot of this. You can see a section comparison between those 3 options. So the Wausau option and the Schuko option had both a 3 1/8 inch meeting rail. And then we did have that kind of hybrid that we tried to develop for maintenance purposes. That was deeper.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and are there other questions? Excuse me. And just one follow-up question. I know that you're trying very hard to otherwise closely match the historic configuration and the brick mold profiles. Can you just speak to the Muntin profile?
Sure. Michael, if you go to slide 53, which is the next slide. So, you know, we had gotten some feedback from staff very recently about the profile of the Muntins. So we worked with Schuko to look at how we could shape the Muntins at all within the parameters of the window. Again, this is sort of like late breaking for us, but we're happy to think about how the Muntins could be made to be more true to the original profile. So this slide shows what we were able to achieve. You can see that there's one historic Muntin left kind of on the building, and that's that south annex facade Muntin. You can see that on the left, and then next is the Schuko Muntin, and then one over. You can see how we were able to modify it. Basically, we only have 3/8 of an inch of depth to work with within the overall for the Muntins on the upper sash before they meet the face of the window frame. But that happens to also be the depth of this historic Muntin as well. So we found we can widen them to be the same width. So widen them to be 1 1/4 inches in width, and make them that extra 1/8 inch deeper. And then we were able to chamfer the edges of the Muntin 45 degrees. And then, you know, there are locations where the Muntins actually cross. And so we would need to cope the Muntins together at those windows. And you can see that detail on the far right. So I just, you know, I want to note that although these windows are custom, we've gone to great lengths and efforts to use almost entirely standard extrusions with Schuko to minimize what is a pretty catastrophic lead time situation that I'm sure we're all aware of. So we've been trying to use standard profiles as much as possible. But we are assured by Schuko when we brought this up very recently that this custom Muntin wouldn't necessarily significantly impact our targeted lead time. So that was good news.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, commissioners, if there are no other questions, I think we will move to our discussion. So I'm sending you requests now to unmute. Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So we have two components here. We have the rooftop mechanical equipment, which is sort of seen incidentally over these secondary facades. And then we have the replacement of the modern, which are mostly modern windows, with a new high performance window that achieves a recollection of the original configuration and details, but is requesting a change in operation to allow for these various needs that have been presented today. So we'll begin that discussion. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, sure. It's just, I'm not the window expert, but it seems to me that they have made, very credible and very positive efforts to, meet the goal of trying to have a compliant building, but which is meeting climate issues and other, but at the same time, coming as close as possible to a historic model and returning in, the appearance of the building in general to the historic window configuration appearance as best they can. So I think from my point of view, I think this really is approvable, and that even the mutton issue, which came up very late, they have, I think, been dealing with and will continue to deal with the staff without, because they are, I think they're operating in good faith to try to make this as close as possible to the historic configuration, and that's appreciated. So I can actually approve it as presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I don't know whether it's a statement about how fast things are moving in life or how long I've been on the commission, but I can remember the first time we looked at the triple glazed passive house windows for townhouse renovations, and thinking carefully and nervously about the implications of that change. And I think that's pretty much worked out okay. That was a change where the aesthetics of the window were somewhat modified, but the operation was significantly modified. And we were able to overcome that as a commission with a level of consensus that has remained pretty much consistent to today. This is taking that another step further out. Not only is the operation changing, but also the appearance changes. The appearance changes not because of the two-dimensional layout of the window frames and mullions, but because of the planes. Whereas the glass pane is set in on the Schuko window, the frame around the entire window, upper and lower sashes, is flush and very planar as well. Especially the meeting rail, which is wide, considerably wider than the existing window, and also has these rather peculiar weep holes in it, making it very much, I think, a different window. And I'm not sure that I'm ready to go there yet myself. I think that the fact that it's a custom window gives the applicant some options here. Option number one is to modify the frames so that the frame of the lower sash sets in and thus replicates the shadow line and the general appearance of a double hung window a little bit better. The second thing they could do is to do the whole thing as a single sheet of glass, but maybe have the upper sash built out in some way. I mean, I don't know, and it's not my place to design it for them, but I think that the displacement of the frame is a significant modification to the way the windows will look on this building. I mean, I really appreciate how they really they had our number, the applicants, and they knew the issues that would be of concern to us, and their presentation was very detailed, deep into the weeds, and very thoughtful. And they seem to be in quite a tough spot between ADA and the size of the windows and passive house and landmarks. I don't envy their, the tangle that they've put themselves in, but I believe that if they go back to Schuco with some comments that direct them to try to modify the extrusion or modify the design of the window in some way that would allow for the reading of the window on a building of this scale in a much more historic manner, I think that they would find that it would be acceptable to me anyway, and would be a good precedent for going forward with such laudable upgrades to a large building like this. I don't have any difficulties with the rooftop equipment at all.
All right, great. And I think that the staff has, of course, talked to them about how this is different than the other passive house windows. So I think much of this investigative work has already happened, but
yeah,
I understand that you're not quite ready yet. Okay, Commissioner Devonshire.
I agree with Michael 100% on this, but I do appreciate the amount of research they've done, but again, this is another very important change that they're asking for. So I think it needs to be investigated further.
Commissioner Chen.
I'm going to have to defer to the two experts here, both Michael. So I leave it to the majority of the commission on this one.
Can I just interject for one moment?
Please do.
I wanted to just point out one bit of difference between this proposal and other ones. And the issue of the perimeter frame all being in one plane is not actually, this is not actually the first time this has been shown. The project at 108 Leonard, which is an individual landmark, that's actually the window that was used there that was approved by this commission. The difference is that that one only has the lower sash operating. This project, it is the entire top to bottom window that operates. So this is not the first time that the issue of the, sort of the perimeter frame all being in one plane has come up, just to make that distinction.
Okay.
Thank you, Corey.
Great. Commissioner Lutfi.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. But I happen to agree that this is, this is precedent setting for us. And at some point in the future, more buildings will be coming to us with this type of request. I also commend the applicant for all of the hard work that they're doing. They want to do this right. This building is located in an important historic district, like in an incredible location on Lower Fifth Avenue. And I think it behooves them to do just a little more work to see if they can get closer in terms of the profile, the muntins, etc.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree with Commissioner Goldblum and his comments.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
As do I.
Commissioner Schumer-Barron.
I think I generally agree that there might, if it's possible, if these are in fact custom windows, the custom application needs to go a little bit further, and maybe there can be a way to kind of simulate or to camouflage, disguise the fact that it's in fact one frame, but with some kind of planar shift in the upper or the lower or something. But I feel very strongly about the first floor windows, that those need to not be aluminum windows potentially, and really, as much as possible, recall the historic configuration, dimensions, profile, and materials. I think walking on Fifth Avenue there, you really do experience this ground floor, the fabric of the windows. And those have to be a different story in my mind.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holbert-Smith.
I agree with Commissioner Goldblum's assessment that a greater offset needs to be shown in the window between the upper and lower sash. Somehow, working with either Wausau or Schuco to improve that, make it look more like a double hung window. But I also do agree with Adi on the ground floor windows that they are so, you come right up against them, that they need to be much more replicative than what they're showing currently.
Okay. And the material may actually be something that meets our rules, but we can talk to them about other ways to be more replicative, or maybe the material in lieu of some other things. Maybe a kind of a menu there. All right, so we're not going to take an action today. I think that while we are, we recognize the challenges that you all have in all of the various levels of regulations that you need to meet and to accommodate the dorm use. We, I think, feel that it would be helpful if you could do a little more investigative work with the manufacturer to try to come a little bit closer to the historic condition, particularly at the plane, change in plane for the first and second floor. So we'll take no action, and we'll have you back as soon as you're ready to come back. Thank you. We'll move to the, actually this is.
Next item is public hearing item number 3.
That's right.
Okay. LPC 22-03566, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 458, lot 27, 45 to 47 Second Avenue in the East Village, Lower East Side Historic District. This is a pair of Italianate style tenement buildings designed by John O'Neill and built in 1867. And the application is to construct a rooftop addition.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Just click on your screen. And then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Yes, good morning. My name is Tom Winter of Tom Winter Architects. We're the architects for this proposed rooftop extension. Location is 4547 Second Avenue. And we see this overview map. We're between 2nd Street and 3rd Street. This is the East Village, Lower East Side Historic District. Our building was initially built in 1867. It's an Italianate style, and it's really one building, but it has a split cornice, so it's actually really 2 buildings. We have 2 separate bins at Buildings Department, but it's sitting on one zoning lot, so we treat it as one building. We have some historic pictures from the 1940s. These are tax photographs showing the 4-story building, exactly the same way it looks today, except that we have a little bit less clutter with the signage on the first floor. This picture shows our building to the left and these buildings on 3rd Street, which were built a little bit earlier. They're 3-story plus a basement, so they are almost similar in height. The bottom row is showing today's condition. Here's 2nd Avenue. We see this building here. We grayed out everything else to just put the focus on our building. To the left, we have a 7-story commercial building. And these are different views looking north on 2nd Avenue, head on from the opposite side of 2nd Avenue. And then this is looking more from the north down. Here's a context aerial picture where we show where our building is, and to show a little bit of 3-dimensional context. Our building is here in the center. The proposed rooftop enlargement is shown in orange, which is set back from the street wall just to make sure that we keep the integrity of the historic building from the street view. We have these five buildings on 3rd Street, 3 stories, and we see rooftop additions on these 2 buildings here, and they're pretty prominent also from the street view. A little bit further north, a taller building, a little bit further west, taller buildings across the street, which is outside the landmark district, but still notable. It's an 11-story proposed new building. So the existing buildings across the street will be demolished and replaced with this much taller building. So these are pictures where we looked at other rooftop additions in the same historic district. And most notably, there are rooftop enlargements right next to our building. Here and here, and in the aerial picture, it's visible. So it's the 2nd building from the corner and the 4th building from the corner. Then here's a rooftop addition, like a retrofitted rooftop addition on 2nd Street. On 7th Street, there's a pretty prominent one, also on 2nd Street, 2-story vertical enlargement. Interesting, the material choice here. So all these enlargements appear to have a darker material. Metals appears to be a predominant material for this standing seam here. This is a metal cladding. There's another project on 4th Street with a sloping enlargement. These are our line drawings. On the left side is always the existing condition, on the right side the proposed condition. This is a head-on elevation, obviously. So since all these items are set back to various degrees, visibility is much less than it looks here in our elevation drawing. This is the rear elevation, also with a setback to identify the enlargement as its own separate entity, and not trying to mimic historic enlargement of the base building. This is the side elevation, so we see the setback here. We lean this street wall back to minimize visibility from 2nd Avenue. The street wall is a standing seam, and whereas the side wall is a stucco finish. We presented this to the community board, and the community board approved with conditions. And 2 of the conditions were to lower the overall bulk of the building. We initially didn't have a railing, but just a parapet wall. And we lowered the bulk of the vertical enlargement, and we also reduced the ceiling height on that 5th floor to further minimize the visual impact. This is a cross section which shows that we lean this back, so we have a setback of more than 10 feet here at the top. We also, there's a bulkhead. Obviously, there's a building code requirement to bring the stairs all the way up to the rooftop. We also want to provide recreational roof, so it's a usable roof terrace. There's mechanical equipment which needs to be screened by zoning requirements. And the stair bulkhead, we also lean this wall back as much as the roof essentially, or the street wall, as much back as possible to further mitigate visibility. And we see that view line here. This is a sideline analysis. The cornice basically covers a lot of the enlargement, and we just expose like the top area of this enlargement. Oops, I'm sorry. That was a little bit too fast. And we see that the bulkhead is shaped in a way so that it's not visible from the opposite side of 2nd Avenue. We have a few renderings prepared. Again, on the left side is always the original photograph, and on the right side our rendering with the proposed enlargement. This is on 2nd Avenue, on the opposing side, on the opposite side of the street, on the east side of the street. And needless to say that there is no visibility from the west side of 2nd Avenue. Then we just go around. So this is like the upper portion of that leaning enlargement with the with a railing on top, which is also a setback. Head on, the same thing, just see a little bit of a strip here. And then we have this side view. This is an existing condition. So somebody in the past just tarred over this side wall. And so we tried to remove the tar, but the tar is very much in the pores of the brick and in the joints, and is so it's not possible to remove that tar. So we will just propose to keep the tar finish as is. But this reminded us of a silhouette of a building because it's black. So we propose to keep the entire silhouette line of the existing facade for legibility of the historic building. And we just fit our enlargement like a puzzle piece onto that existing silhouette. In terms of color, we have, we're going to be with a darker gray for the solid part of the enlargement. The railing is painted in a lighter gray. This is probably even shown a little bit too dark, so this will blend a little bit further into the sky. And then we have this view, which is further north on 2nd Avenue. And we see the existing enlargements here of our neighboring buildings. And here's our proposed enlargement, which kind of blends into the dark side facade of our neighboring building to the south. And so we want to keep this dark to further reduce visibility of our enlargement. Then we have an mock-up photographs, which basically just confirms what we see in the renderings. This is the side view of looking north from 2nd Avenue. Here's an axonometric, which shows the leaning front facade, the railing that is further set back, the bulkheads, which are shaved in shape, so they're not visible from 2nd Avenue. And floor plans on the 4th floor, don't need to go much into detail. This is the proposed 5th floor plan with the 2 stairwells. And then we have the roof plan with the mechanical equipment here, which is screened, and the remainder is the recreational roof. Window schedule, don't need. Okay, so this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I'm not seeing any questions right now, so we'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony.
Alrighty, thank you. So I have Laura Sewell from East Village Community Coalition. Laura, you'll be receiving a request from me now. Okay, Laura, I see you've rejoined the meeting as a panelist. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, thank you. And good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Laura Sewell. I'm the director of the East Village Community Coalition. We appreciate that the material and color of the cladding in the proposal under consideration today is notably improved over what we saw at CB3. However, the proposed rooftop addition is still impactful and jarringly bulky, particularly when viewed from the side while walking south on 2nd Avenue. This modern addition looms above its shorter neighbors in the East Village Lower East Side Historic District. So in consideration of this, and just also to mention, the rear faces the Marble Cemetery, which is a landmark, and the addition takes up the entire rooftop. So it also is very much visible from the Marble Cemetery, just something to consider. So we are urging that the commissioners design this application as presented and recommend that this design be further refined. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next, I will be calling on Anna Markham from Village Preservation. Anna, you should be receiving a request from me to rejoin the meeting as a panelist. Okay, and I see that you are in the meeting. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Anna Markham, and I am the Director of Research and Preservation for Village Preservation. I am speaking on behalf of the organization today. This proposal is much improved from what was presented at Community Board 3. However, the proposed rooftop addition leaves much to be desired. These Italianate tenements retain a remarkable level of architectural integrity. They are exactly the type of building that the East Village Lower East Side Historic District was designated to protect. The addition is still far too visible from the public right-of-way, particularly from the side elevation. The window openings at the front and back of the addition should better relate to the existing building. For example, 6 dormer windows on the front facade instead of 8 would more properly align with the historic window openings below. We urge the commissioners to deny this application as is and recommend that the design be further refined before representing to the Community Board 3 and the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next I have George Calderaro from Victorian Society of New York. George, you should be receiving a request from me. Okay, George, please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. George Calderaro for the Victorian Society, New York. The VSNY cannot support any parts of this proposal, which we strongly believe will have serious negative effects on this building, the overall appearance of this section of 2nd Avenue, and the entire historic district. Part of the problem with the proposal is that the applicants have ignored the reality of their site. They've designed an addition which might be acceptable for a mid-block building on a side street. But in fact, their building faces a wide avenue, and because there's an empty lot on its north side, it's actually a corner building with a very visible secondary facade. Their bulky, full-width addition will become a dominant feature on both sides, both of its visible facades, and will also be seen rising above the designated buildings on East 3rd Street. The other problem is what made this 155-year-old building a great candidate for designation in 2012 when the district was created. It is wonderfully intact. Take away the modern storefront at number 47, the roll-down security gates, and the hand-fill of through-the-wall air conditioners, and you have a building President Grant, Harry Houdini, or Lillian Russell would recognize. All those people know how a tall silk hat could enhance a distinguished face, but neither they nor VSNY can explain how an awkward box clad in standing seam metal can do anything but diminish this fine building. We recommend that this proposal be denied. Thank you, Commissioners.
All righty, thank you. Next, I will be calling on Richard Moses from Lower East Side Preservation Initiative. Richard, you should be receiving a request from me to rejoin as a panelist. All right, Richard, I see that you are in the meeting. You can go ahead, please. Just unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair Carroll and commissioners. My name is Richard Moses. I'm president of the Lower East Side Preservation Initiative, also known as LESPI. We agree with the previous testimony that the proposed addition is really too large for this building. We're not opposed to any addition here, but we feel particularly strongly that the addition needs to be set back further from the street facade so that there's less of a conflict with the architecturally developed front facades of the building. And then furthermore, we would like to see the rooftop railings set back more. I think they're now set back at 3 feet, and they would be much better set back at the maximum 6 feet that I believe that the building code allows. And I want to thank you for your consideration.
All right, thank you. Next, Michelle Arbalou, you'll be receiving a request from me. Okay, Michelle, I see you're rejoining the meeting as a panelist. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. Let's see. Okay, Michelle, all you have to do is unmute your mic.
Hi, Michelle Arbalou speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. The Historic Districts Council believes that changing the party wall material of the rooftop addition to brick, reducing the pitch of the street-facing facade, and reducing its overall height to 2 feet will make this proposal a more palatable addition to the roofscape. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let me take a glance back over. Okay, I do not see any more hands raised, so there's no one else who wishes to speak. I'll pass it back over to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you. As has been stated, we did receive the resolution from Manhattan Community Board 3 recommending approval of the application with the following conditions: that the addition be set back more and to reduce its visibility. So I'd like to turn back to the applicants. We've heard a lot of very specific recommendations in the testimony. Would you like to respond to any of the comments?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So we actually took the comments of the community board into consideration. So as I mentioned before, we initially had the railing, not a railing, but a parapet wall. So the building bulk was about 3.5 feet taller, and then we also lowered the ceiling height on the 5th floor by almost a foot. So we got the overall bulk reduced by more than 4 feet. We also set the front facade further back, and we leaned it actually further back, so to further diminish visibility. The comment regarding the windows that may have referred to a previous submittal that we initially proposed to the community board, which actually had dormer windows, but we omitted these dormer windows, also responding to comments of the community board, because they looked indeed too prominent. And so we now have just roof windows, and I can probably show this in a, oops, do I have control over this presentation?
No, can you tell
okay.
me what slide you were looking for?
I'm looking at a front elevation, which is, if we go, yeah, keep going. Keep going. We don't want to see the rendering. So the renderings also show that there's no visibility of the windows because we're only looking at, go one back, please. Yeah, the other way, please. Yeah, so we don't see any windows here. In an initial proposal, we had dormers which were actually visible, but we omitted those and turned to roof windows which are not visible. If you can go the other way again, I just wanted to look at the side view. Keep going. Yeah. So this view here is there's indeed like about a 10-foot gap between the buildings, which is essentially the rear yard of the buildings that are facing 3rd Street. This is because it's only a 10-foot wide window. This is not the main visibility. So any person who would pass by would have this view only for a very short period of time. All the other views are more dominant. Can you go one more into that same direction, please? Yeah, and so this is the view from 2nd Avenue, looking north to south. And so one of the comments was that this is essentially a corner lot. But it's obviously not a corner lot because the corner lot is occupied by this building here. And we also have a rooftop enlargement on the 2nd building in. So this is not a new theme to what we're doing, or to this area rather. And I feel strongly that this rooftop enlargement blends into the gray of the adjacent building. And it was would be a much different story and discussion if this tall building wasn't there. So we feel that there's a proper backup, and which reduces the visibility of our enlargement. And again, looking from 2nd Avenue straight to the building, or looking from the south, has very, very little visibility. Thank you.
Commissioners, do we have any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Can the applicant address the point while we're in this part about the visibility to and from Marble Cemetery, which it is a public situation, isn't it? More so than a sort of a private or less occupied or less populated donut hole.
Yeah, can we go in the presentation to page 2, please? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the marble cemetery is a center block, and you see this in the. Could you please point on? Yeah, exactly. That's the marble cemetery. The cemetery is, as far as I know, open to the public, but only in very limited opening hours. I have been to this building many times in the past months, and there is quite good visibility from the building, even from the second floor over to the marble cemetery. And I have never seen anybody actually going to the marble cemetery. It's like it's just not. It's not an empirical thing. It's just my personal perception that yes, it is. It is a notable area in the middle of this block. But I believe that the visibility discussion from the public, from public streets, is probably a more significant discussion, as the marble cemetery is not an area which is largely populated or frequented by people.
It's not technically a public way; it's a private.
Yeah, commissioners, the marble cemetery is not a public way. It has a locked gate. It's privately owned. You know. It's not public way as we use the term.
Sorry, and are there views from the street through the cemetery gate? Did we see those already? Not from that street, but the other one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, from 3rd Street, we did not provide any photographs because visibility is essentially zero. Because it's eclipsed by these buildings right next to the gap.
All right. Okay, and your addition is set back from the rear facade by how much?
Yeah, so we're at the top. The setback is 10 foot, and yeah, here's there was a diagram with the visibility sidelines. If you go forward, yeah, keep going, more. Yeah, there. So we have, yes, unfortunately, the dimension line is a bit small. So we have 10'6" setback at the top, and at the bottom, I can't read it here. I have to go to my own presentation. 1 second. At the base, it's set back by 4'6", but that base is like is fully eclipsed by the cornice and the side wall. So this point would never be seen. At the top, it is 10'6".
Is that 10'6" from the building facade, or is that 10'6" from the fire escape?
No, it's well, we're talking about the front setback or the back setback?
Back setback. So
Oh, I'm
Mark,
sorry.
The
Okay,
back,
okay.
The,
Yeah,
the
I'm
rear
sorry.
wall is set back a little over 4 feet from the rear facade.
Yeah, so I have
He's
to.
talking about the second level.
Yes, the back setback is 4'6".
And at the second level, what's up there is 10
Oh,
foot.
this is yeah, this is just a screen for the mechanical equipment, which is 6 foot tall, and very much because it's only in the center. You can go 1 page back, please. Oh no, I'm sorry. Go the other way. I just want to show the floor plan. Keep going that way. Yeah, keep
Is
going.
that screen what you were referring to when you said 10 feet back?
Yeah, so here we see it. You can go to the axon. Sorry, I wish I had control over this. Yeah, this is good too. So go 1 slide forward.
I'll give it back to you in just a second.
Okay, great. Yeah, okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Just click on your screen.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we see mechanical equipment here, and the screen is along the outer perimeter of that mechanical equipment. It's 6 foot tall, and it's very far set back from all sides. So the visual impact is marginal, if any at all.
Okay, so commissioners, if there are no other questions, I'm going to start to send you a request to unmute so that we can begin our discussion. All right, and Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Devonshire, would you second the motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion for this proposed rooftop addition, which is sort of taking its inspiration from the sort of studio window type additions around the corner on similar buildings. It's set back from the rear of 4'6". Typically, we require a minimum of 3 foot setback. And then there is visibility over the primary facade. You see the very top of it, and then through the gap and over the side facade on the adjacent to it. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you start this one?
Sure. Overall, I think the applicant has done a good job with this. There happen to be in the area, as we've seen, some other additions of a variety of sizes. What I think would be helpful is if the applicant just took a little bit of height off of this addition, and also if the railings could be set back so they're not so visible. It looks like from the various angles that we've been shown that you really can't see that much, and you really can't see those windows. So if those changes could be made, I would be okay with it.
Jefferson?
I have two issues. One has to do with the angle. And if the angle was shallower, I think it would be less visible. And two, the railings have to be pushed back because they become extremely visible and they can be seen from across the street. And the scale of it should be smaller somehow. I mean, a smaller scale.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson?
I think I'm aligned with Commissioner Jefferson. The scale and the cornice detail of a lot of the buildings in this district define them. While a rooftop addition could certainly be appropriate here, as the applicant himself said, legibility of the historic building is important. And from 5 or 6 different views, this addition in its current iteration actually interferes with the legibility of the building at the roof line, especially since it's viewed in many of these instances against open sky. So I think it has to be how they get to the result. It has to be moved back, lowered, something like that.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Baron?
I think I agree with Commissioner Gustafson's comments, both that there can be a rooftop addition here, but that it should be even further studied to potentially reduce height or setback or visibility generally. But I think I do also think that in this case, there need to be studies of the rear, of how it's perceived in the rear. And while I accept obviously what you've said about this being a private back donut hole, meaning that it's privately owned and gated and so on. And unlike other rear yard additions where someone might be somewhere in that space relating to a specific house or a specific townhouse's backyard. Here, you really can, because in the cemetery, you can walk all the way to kind of to one side of it, and directly on the other long side is this building and its full elevation. And I think that because of that, there is a kind of a different level of sort of that something is seen, how much of it is seen. And while it's not public, it's kind of perceived as a public might. So, or perceivable. So I do think that just as they've studied the kind of the chamfering of the front facade, they might want to try to do that in the rear or set it back further, but further study, please.
Okay, Commissioner Holford-Smith.
Yes, I agree with a lot of the comments that have already been stated. I think that the visibility over 2nd Avenue should be minimized. The railing pushed back, maybe the slope of the chamfer shallow, made more shallow, as Everardo suggested. I also think the color, I know that they're trying to make it sort of blend in with the tar, but I think that that is an anomaly. And I think that the gray should be a lighter color. The more of like a zinc color on the standing seam, and then maybe a gray on the stucco on the side. I think that a rooftop addition is approvable, but I think it should be minimized in its appearance.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I feel like it's, again, that a rooftop addition is certainly possible here, that this seems too bulky and blockish. And, it's very, especially from like perspective, views 4 and 5 from the front, I think that it doesn't have the sense of a skylight addition. There's, it just seems like a block of something up there. And I think that not only it should be reduced somewhat, but also that if it could appear more like some of the others additions with skylights, that would be more successful and seem more to fit in better and be more appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Well, to confuse things further, I think that the visibility of the front addition is acceptable as is, but the railing should be pushed back. The railing for me is the most problematic element. I think that the fenestration of the front should be more Northlight-like, in other words, more continuous with mullions, as opposed to sky, hole, which it suggests windows, and this is not really a dormer type application. I think that one thing that hasn't been attended to for a visible front facade is an expression, a little bit more emphatic expression of the separation between the two buildings. You often, what you see in this kind of condition is an expressed party wall, capped maybe with terracotta, maybe with the roofing material, but something that expresses the fact that it's two buildings. And in terms of the side wall, I think Anne's right that a lighter gray would probably be better. But one thing that we have seen a lot in projects like this is people will strip the tar off the side and extend the brick up to follow along with the addition, which I think would be another appropriate suggestion, and it would probably improve the longevity of the brick underneath if it is still in acceptable shape.
Devonshire. Commissioner Devonshire.
Yeah, I think I agree with most of what my colleagues have said about it. It needs to be less visible, and that railing needs to disappear completely. I fear that what they would find if they remove the tar, which isn't going to be easy, is that it's going to be, again, it's going to be less vitrified brick. It's going to be backup brick. And so they may end up having to replace all of that brick. So I'm sort of the leave it alone, but yes, differentiate it with a slightly different color school.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I guess there's a consensus here about the visibility from Second Avenue, about the railing. And I think I agree with Abby and John and, most of the comments.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think that we won't take an action today. We will ask the applicants to restudy the proposal. I think everybody is comfortable with the presence of a rooftop addition here, but that the overall scale, height, angle of the slope at the front, fenestration and material need to be restudied to reduce its appearance and presence. So I think it's just a little bit more work and then you might be there. So we'll take no action and we'll see you back when you're ready. Okay. And so that concludes our morning session. We're now going to break for lunch and we will return at 1:30. We are behind schedule. So, we'll try to be very prompt and come back right at 1:30. Commissioners, if you want to hop on.